Chapter 1195. The main purpose of the Blissful Demon Palace's branch palace that Ming Xuanyu oversaw was to capture the ferocious beasts in the Dilua mountain range. Of course, there were also barbarians among them, who were used for various experiments by the Blissful Demon Palace. So, when Ming Xuanyu heard from Xianxia that Chu Xiu could control a barbarian tribe, he immediately thought of how useful it would be for the Blissful Demon Palace. The barbarians in the Dilua mountain range were not weak. He could deal with some small tribes, but if he were to provoke a large tribe, it would cause the large tribes in the depths of the Dilua mountain range to join forces against him. That would be very difficult to deal with. If he could be like Chu Xiu and control a large tribe in the southern barbarian land, it would be much more convenient for him to have them help him capture people. However, Ming Xuanyu still didn't agree to Xianxia's request. Xianxia was only providing him with information. If he wanted the Blissful Demon Palace to be his fighter, how could it be that easy? So, Ming Xuanyu put on a troubled expression and said, "Brother Xian, to be honest, I also want to do it. But right now, my branch palace is a bit understaffed. Among the several branches of the Blissful Demon Palace, my branch palace is a very difficult job. We need to collect ferocious beasts and capture the barbarians. So, don't be fooled by the number of people in my branch palace. In fact, there aren't many people here. If I send people to help you, what will happen to my task here?" Xianxia frowned and inwardly cursed Ming Xuanyu for being too greedy. After thinking for a while, Xianxia took out a bone from his spatial box. The bone was the size of an arm, but it looked like a finger bone. It was pitch black and emitted a ferocious aura. Ming Xuanyu's eyes immediately revealed a look of surprise. "This is the finger bone of a black demon ape?" Xianxia nodded. "It's the black demon ape's finger bone. When the Sanskrit Church first arrived in the western regions, we dispatched a large number of experts to exterminate this beast. Even a martial immortal expert died. Originally, we wanted to subdue this beast, but we didn't expect it to be so ferocious. Left with no choice, we could only use our full strength to kill it. After so many years, most of the materials on this black demon ape have been used up. This phalanx is the only thing I have left. Brother Ming, bring him back to the Blissful Devil Palace's headquarters and report to them. Have the others surround and kill Chu Xiu. Is that enough?" Ming Xuanyu put away the finger bone of the black demonic ape and couldn't help but reveal a smile on his gloomy face. "Yes, of course it's enough. However, Brother Xian, I'll say it again. If you want me to fight alone, then it doesn't matter. But if you want to borrow the power of my Blissful Demon Palace, you can't cross the border. Overstepping one's boundaries is a huge taboo. My Blissful Devil Palace has never thought of becoming enemies with those big sects of the eastern region." Xianxia said in a deep voice, "That's easy. I've said it before. I'm not asking you to go to Jianghu County. Make your move in the Dilua mountain range in the southern barbaric lands. That place can't be considered as the Imperial Sky Pavilion's territory, right? Then how are you going to lure him to the southern barbaric land? It's very simple. Isn't the Black Civ tribe under their control? Just send people to exterminate the Black Civ tribe. Remember, there's no need to be too ruthless. It's fine as long as they feel the threat of extermination. At that time, they'll naturally be lured over." Ming Xuanyu waved his hand and said, "I'm familiar with that. I guarantee that I'll handle it properly." As he spoke, Ming Xuanyu raised the cup of sticky blood and offered it to Xianxia. "Speaking of which, Brother Xian, are you sure you don't want a cup? It's very nourishing." Xianxia had a cold expression. "I'm very strong. I don't need nourishment." In Jianghu County. During this period of time, Chu Xiu didn't go into closed-door training. Instead, he instructed the crowd to set up defenses and gather information regarding Xianxia. Although Xianxia didn't reveal his name, his strength of half-step martial immortal and his extremely eye-catching cultivation technique were enough to prove his identity. Sanskrit sect, Vishnu Palace, Sun God Palace's Palace Master Xianxia. He was an expert half-step martial immortal and the successor of the Vishnu Palace's Palace Master. In fact, once he stepped into the martial immortal realm, the previous Palace Master would immediately step down. Xianxia's status was clearly much higher than Mariha's. Thus, even if Chu Xiu knew that the Sanskrit sect wouldn't launch a large-scale attack, Chu Xiu still wouldn't be able to handle two experts of such caliber. As for Tianhun, Chu Xiu didn't tell him about this matter. Being imprisoned in the spiritual cloud realm, Tianhun couldn't do anything apart from his head. Even if Chu Xiu exhausted the power of his primordial spirit, he would only be able to ask Tianhun some questions regarding cultivation. As for asking Tianhun for advice, Chu Xiu never thought about that. He believed in his own abilities. Furthermore, he didn't think that Tianhun was stronger than him. Tianhun wasn't Dugu Weiwei. He had inherited Dugu Weiwei's memory from 500 years ago. Thus, even if he walked the same path as Dugu Weiwei 500 years ago, he might have the strength of Dugu Weiwei, but he wouldn't have the means of Dugu Weiwei. Chu Xiu had fought his way up from the mortal world. Obviously, he was better at this kind of thing. Just as Chu Xiu had arranged everything, Kecha sent news that He Luo tribe was in trouble. Hearing this news, Chu Xiu suddenly frowned. Previously, he had told He Jia and the others that accumulating strength should be done step by step. If he was too aggressive, it would easily cause the whole southern barbarian tribe to target him. Could it be that He Jia was too impatient for success, so he caused a siege? He Luo tribe was the key to Chu Xiu's plan in the southern barbarian land. Unless he had the strength to deal with all the southern barbarian tribes in the Dilua mountain range, he had to use He Luo tribe. Therefore, when he heard that He Luo tribe was in trouble, he immediately went to the southern barbarian land. After arriving at He Luo tribe, Chu Xiu discovered that He Jia and the others were in a worse state than he had imagined. He Jia's bones were all broken, and his face was pale. He had been seriously injured. Green Jade's face was also extremely pale. Although she wasn't injured, her aura was extremely weak. It was obvious that her spirit had been injured. What's going on? Which tribe injured you so badly? Chu Xiu asked with a frown. He Jia was so injured that he couldn't speak. Green Jade's aura was weak as she said, "It's the foreigners from the south." Green Jade obviously didn't recognize the people from the blissful demon palace. Since it wasn't the foreigners from the east, it must be from the south. Kecha said, "Sir, it's the people from the blissful demon palace." The blissful demon palace? Chu Xiu frowned. He had come across the ruins of the blissful demon palace in the lower world. He only had two impressions of this sect. One was that they were stubborn, and the other was that they were evil. In fact, this was indeed the case. The blissful demon palace didn't have a good reputation among the Daoist people. The main reason was that they liked to research all sorts of strange and evil things. Therefore, they were hated by all the Daoist people. The blissful demon palace is in the southern territory. Why would they come here and attack the He Luo tribe? Kecha explained, the blissful demon palace likes to research all sorts of evil techniques. Some of them even use living people as experiments. They're purely tired of living if they attack the large sections. Even if they attack some independent cultivators or small sects without any foundation, their reputation will be affected, or they will be warned. Therefore, they can only target the barbarians. Near the southern territory, the blissful demon palace even specially built a branch to capture the barbarians and ferocious beasts in the Dilua mountain range. Perhaps because they've been capturing them for too long, the barbarians near the southern territory have become a little vigilant. Therefore, they came to the mountain range near the eastern territory to capture them. Chu Xiu nodded. He suddenly asked, "Did the blissful demon palace try to kill you? Who was the one who did it?" Green Jade shook her head and said, "No, they didn't. They seemed to want to capture us alive. The patriarch was already injured to this extent, but they still didn't kill us. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to escape. The one who did it was just an ordinary heaven and earth mystic insight realm cultivator. He's far weaker than you, my lord. However, they have many things in their hands that can restrain our tribe. We've never come into contact with these things before. We were caught off guard and fell into their trap." Chu Xiu nodded. Although he still felt that something was wrong, everything made sense. It seemed like the other party had really come to capture them. As for Xianxia, it wasn't that Chu Xiu was careless, but he had overlooked something. The Daoist and the lower realm were different. Chu Xiu had been in the lower realm for so many years. The idea that the righteous and demonic paths couldn't coexist with each other had been carved into his bones. Not long ago, he had even destroyed 2 Buddhist sections. However, the Daoist were different. The Buddhists and demonic paths didn't have such a strong antagonism. They belonged to 4 different regions. The Buddhists were in the western region, while the demonic paths were in the southern region. The grudges between the 2 sides weren't that big. Even with Dugu Weiwei's appearance, Dugu Weiwei's target was the entire Daoist, not the righteous path. Even though the Sanskrit sect style was different from the heavenly treasure Shahs, it was still considered a branch of the Buddhist path. Chu Xiu would never have thought that this matter was actually a trap set up by Xianxia. Hence, Chu Xiu said, "For the time being, the Black Net tribe will withdraw their defenses. Leave it to me." Beside him, Kocha said, "Are you going to make a move, my lord? As far as I know, the people from the Blissful Demon Palace are all crazy people. They're not easy to deal with." Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes. "Even if they're not easy to deal with, we'll fight them. The Dilua mountain range is huge. If they want to go somewhere else, I can't stop them. But if they insist on causing trouble here, then don't blame me for being impolite." After giving Green Jade his orders, Chu Xiu sent Kocha back to report the situation. He himself headed to the place that Green Jade had mentioned, the place where the Blissful Demon Palace were camped. In the gloomy mountain forest, powerful demonic energy drifted about. It was extremely conspicuous. Chu Xiu didn't need to look too hard to find it. However, before Chu Xiu could get close, he sensed that something was wrong. This mountain range was close to the eastern region, which was extremely far from the southern region. The Blissful Demon Palace had captured so many barbarians, so they should know that the barbarians were extremely hostile towards them. Yet, they were still so high profile. Weren't they afraid of being discovered and attacked by a group of barbarians? After all, these barbarian tribes were still very united when facing outsiders. Sensing that something was wrong, Chu Xiu was just about to retreat when the blinding golden rays of the sun lit up. Xianxia calmly walked out and said, "Chu Xiu, you can't escape from my grasp." Chapter 1196. The moment he saw Xianxia, Chu Xiu knew that he had fallen into a trap. There was no vexation or remorse. Chu Xiu rarely had such emotions. Counter soldiers with arms, water with an earth weir. If there was a problem, he would solve it. There was no medicine for regret in this world. Moreover, Xianxia wasn't the only one who had appeared in front of Chu Xiu. Ming Xuanyu and 2 other Pure Bliss Demon Palace Mystic Illumination Realm experts were also here. The outermost group was a group of Pure Bliss Demon Palace disciples, setting up a formation from afar. They were too weak. If they approached, they would be detected by Chu Xiu. Moreover, they were afraid of suffering too many casualties. Therefore, they could only set up a formation to intercept them from afar. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes. Xianxia, what are you trying to do? I've already said that I don't know any Moriha. Why do you insist on pestering me? You don't know Moriha? Then where did the illusion on your body come from? Don't tell me that it was passed down by your ancestors. There aren't that many coincidences in this world. Xian Jialua sneered. Chu Xiu, if you really have a clear conscience, then follow me back to the Sanskrit sect. My Vishnu palace has a secret technique to probe one's mind. After proving that you're innocent, I will personally apologize to you. Otherwise, if you resist, it means that you have a guilty conscience. That means that there's something fishy going on. Chu Xiu snorted. What a joke. I'm the Imperial Sky Pavilion's Jianghu County Governor and primeval successor. You want to probe my mind just because you say so? That's a complete humiliation. Xian Jialua, you want to attack me just because of a groundless matter? Aren't you afraid that the Imperial Sky Pavilion and my master will blame you? Xian Jialua sneered. Afraid? If I was afraid, I wouldn't have attacked you before. Cut the crap. Chu Xiu, since you're unwilling to surrender, don't blame me for being impolite. Attack. With that, Xian Jialua waved his hand, ordering Ming Xuanyu and the others to charge forward. If Xian Jialua came alone, Chu Xiu wouldn't be able to defeat him, but he was confident that he could block him. However, now that Ming Xuanyu had joined the fray, as well as two heaven and earth profound insight cultivators, Chu Xiu was truly unable to hold them off. Therefore, in that instant, the pure demonic aura around Chu Xiu's body swirled and frantically devoured the surrounding qi of heaven and earth. With the use of the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth, Chu Xiu's body began to expand continuously. A strong aura suddenly descended like a demon god. Divine ability. Divine ability. Xian Jialua and Ming Xuanyu almost simultaneously spat out these two words. The two of them were both martial artists from the peak schools of the Jianghu. They were also existences with hopes of reaching the martial immortal realm. Naturally, they would not be unfamiliar with divine abilities. However, that was something that they had yet to grasp. Only after reaching the martial immortal realm would they dare to attempt to grasp it. And now, Chu Xiu had openly used a divine ability right before their eyes. This was an enormous blow to them. Furthermore, as Chu Xiu unleashed the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth, he also turned his gaze towards Ming Xuanyu and the other Bliss Demon Palace cultivators. His eyes flickered with dense killing intent. Seeing that, Ming Xuanyu immediately shouted, "Retreat! Retreat!" At that moment, he was cursing in his heart. I'm clearly here to help. The one who wants to capture you is Xian Jialua. Why are you attacking me? Although Ming Xuanyu had fought with many people and seen divine abilities, he had never faced a divine ability before. He did not know what sort of might a divine ability from a heaven and earth profound insight cultivator would possess. However, it was clear that it would not be weak. He had only come to help. He did not want to lose his life. Even if he were to be injured, it would not be worth it. However, at that moment, Chu Xiu's figure rapidly shrunk. The natural energy that he had frantically absorbed dispersed in an instant, transforming into an extremely powerful explosive force. In an instant, Chu Xiu's figure was already several hundred zhang away. In that instant, Ming Xuanyu's expression darkened. I've been tricked. I've actually been tricked. Facing two peak heaven and earth profound insight cultivators, one of whom was a half-step martial immortal, Chu Xiu would have to be insane to fight them head-on. The might of the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth or the clear sky illuminating shadow was indeed astonishing. However, even a slightly weaker lawful embodiment of heaven and earth would threaten Chu Xiu's source energy if used for too long. Thus, even if Chu Xiu were to risk his life and kill one of them, he would still suffer a loss. What else could he do but run? Xian Jialua did not retreat in fear. As he chased after Chu Xiu, he shouted angrily at Ming Xuanyu, "Why are you running?" Ming Xuanyu snorted coldly, but did not say a word. That was a divine ability, and it was aimed at you. If you were in my shoes, would you not run? At that moment, the blissful demon palace cultivators in the distance had already activated their array, blocking in front of Chu Xiu. However, in the next instant, Chu Xiu's god domain opened up around him. Within the misty domain, yin and yang were in a mess, and the 5 elements were reversed. Everything was distorted. The radiance of the array was distorted and disappeared in the domain. Even though the blissful demon palace cultivators were experts at the true fire spirit refinement realm, once they were pulled into the domain, their bodies began to distort in a strange manner. Even though they frantically used their astral energy, it was of no use. After the astral energy left their bodies, it was immediately melted and torn apart. Their entire bodies were torn into a bloody mist in the domain. No one had ever seen such a strange domain before. Ming Xuanyu shouted from behind, "Retreat! Hurry and retreat!" These people were all elites under his command. Xian Jialuo's finger bone was not enough to exchange for their lives. In fact, even without Ming Xuanyu's words, the blissful demon palace cultivators also began to retreat frantically. No one was willing to throw away their lives like that. Xian Jialuo cursed them inwardly for being useless. However, this group of people had helped him delay Chu Xiu for about a breath's time. 1 breath of time was more than enough. Behind Xian Jialuo, a large sun rose into the sky, and a strong fiery light condensed in his hand, turning into a longbow. In that instant, all the surrounding spiritual energy frantically surged into his longbow, as if it was fuel. With a rumble, raging flames soared into the sky. Powerful power poured into the longbow. As Xian Jialuo's arrow shot out, it was as if the great sun had fallen. Wherever the arrow passed, the trees and forests were instantly burned to ashes. The air was distorted, and the earth and stones under their feet melted like magma erupting. Chu Xiu's expression changed abruptly. Was this the power of a half-step martial immortal? No wonder everyone said that Xian Jialuo would definitely become a martial immortal. With his current power, it was only a matter of time before he became a martial immortal. Chu Xiu turned around and formed hand seals. His domain spread out. The misty domain enveloped the arrow, constantly distorting its power. However, the power of the arrow was too strong. Even if Chu Xiu's domain could distort everything, it could only distort and tear apart the outer layer of flames. The power within was still powerful. But at this moment, Chu Xiu's hand seals had already been completed. In an instant, a series of ghostly wails and howls resounded in the domain. The space in midair was torn apart, and a terrifying demonic shadow reached out and grabbed the arrow. It was as if it wanted to drag the arrow into an endless gloomy land of death. At that moment, Singular formed a seal with his hand. His body had already turned into the scorching light of the sun. His body seemed to have some kind of connection with the arrow. Almost in an instant, he appeared in front of the scorching arrow. Xian Jialuo's hand seals descended and a blazing light blossomed around him. Layers of mystical Sanskrit enveloped him. In the next instant, the great sun descended. Blinding light rose and a scorching aura tore and burned everything. It was as if a volcano had erupted on the ground. A huge crater was formed from the scorching heat. Within the crater, there were even black flowing crystals formed from the melted earth. However, there was no sign of Chu Xiu. There was not even a corpse. Damn it! You really know Moriha's illusion technique. Xian Jialuo reacted in an instant. The power of the Great Compassion Mantra should have been prepared by Chu Xiu long ago. The one who formed the hand seals slowly at the end was not Chu Xiu at all. It was so natural that he could not see any flaws. Other than Moriha's illusion technique, he could not think of a second Daoist technique that could turn illusions into reality. At this time, Ming Xuanyu also came over with his men. He asked, "You didn't catch him?" Xian Jialuo didn't answer him. Instead, he coldly snorted and questioned, "Brother Ming, I gave you the information and the items so that you could help, not to watch the show. Why did you run away just now?" Although Ming Xuanyu was a little embarrassed, he still retorted confidently, that was a divine ability. If you were targeted by a divine ability, would you run? Besides, I asked you about this Chu Xiu before. You didn't say that he knew a divine ability. Xianxia was also speechless. He himself did not know, so how could he tell him? However, this was not the Western territory, nor was it the Sanskrit religion. The only force he could use was the blissful demon palace. Therefore, he could only suppress his anger and said, the monk can run, but the temple can't. As long as this Chu Xiu is still in Jianghu County, he will come out. What are you going to do? Ming Xuanyu asked. Xianxia said coldly, the Black Net tribe is in his hands. He also built a stronghold in the southern barbaric land, which is guarded by the Black Net tribe. It seems that he has some plans in the entire southern barbaric land. Attack his stronghold. If we can't take it down, then surround it until he shows up, or until he abandons his base. Ming Xuanyu shrugged and did not express any opinion. In any case, he was here to be a hired thug, so of course, everything would be decided by Xianxia. However, he still said, Brother Xian, let me say this in advance. This place is very close to Jianghu County. If the Eastern Territory's big sects like High Heaven sect come, I will have to withdraw with my men. It's not worth offending the Eastern Territory's martial world for such a small matter. Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. Xianxia said this, but he felt a little disdainful towards Ming Xuanyu. The other party was a little too cautious. The martial Dao was like being a person. Without a brave and aggressive heart, how could one continue to move forward? In the past, his cultivation was similar to Ming Xuanyu's, but now, he was already half a step into the martial immortal realm, while the other party was only at the peak of the heaven and earth profound insight realm. This was the gap between them. Chapter 1197. As Chu Xiu escaped from the encirclement, his complexion was slightly pale. He didn't use too much of his strength, but his spirit power was greatly exhausted. Xianxia was a half-step martial immortal. If he didn't push his spirit power to its peak, he wouldn't be able to hide from Xianxia. Furthermore, at a time like this, even if he were to cast an illusion in front of Xianxia, it wouldn't matter if Xianxia saw it. Xianxia was extremely stubborn and overbearing. As long as he was certain that Chu Xiu was related to Moriha, he must get a result. Furthermore, the result must be determined by him. Thus, no matter how many false testimonies Chu Xiu gave, unless Xianxia personally verified Chu Xiu's memories, he wouldn't believe him. How troublesome. Chu Xiu let out a long sigh. After returning to the Black Luo tribe, he immediately moved the people of the Black Luo tribe to the stronghold he established in the southern barbaric land. At the same time, he notified Wei Shuya and Shang Tianliang to come and stand guard there. Since Xianxia knew of the relationship between him and the Black Luo tribe, it meant that Xianxia would definitely make an issue out of the Black Luo tribe. The Black Luo tribe was something that he had painstakingly nurtured. They were loyal and trusted fighters. He couldn't let them die just like that. When Shang Tianliang, Wei Shuya, and the others arrived and received the news, they also felt that it was very troublesome. Before the absolute power of the blissful demon palace's branch palace and Xianxia, who was a half-step martial immortal, it was clear that playing petty tricks would be useless. Shang Tianliang thought for a moment and said, "You're a member of the Imperial Sky Pavilion now. Isn't the Pavilion Master a martial immortal? Let him deal with this." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "It's not that simple. Right now, the Imperial Sky Pavilion only has a single martial immortal. If he leaves the Imperial Sky Pavilion, there'll be no one to stand guard there. If the Cold River City were to attack us, who would stop them? Putting aside the fact that I'm only a guest of Cold River City, even if Lu Sanjin were to encounter such a crisis, the Imperial Sky Pavilion wouldn't care at all." While Chu Xiu was pondering, Mei Qinglian also walked over at this time. She handed over a pile of information with a solemn expression and said, "This is troublesome. People from the Blissful Devil Palace have been spotted all around the base. It seems like they're planning to surround us and kill us here." Chu Xiu knocked his head, feeling a little headache. In the face of such absolute power, he couldn't think of any good methods. Fortunately, this base's array formation was even more powerful than the county governor manors. After all, this place was the passageway between the two worlds, and there were many disciples of the Kunlun devil cult cultivating in it. Naturally, Chu Xiu had to be extremely cautious and directly operated this stronghold as the headquarters of the Kunlun devil cult. However, it wasn't enough to just be surrounded by people. Moreover, it was impossible for him to activate the array formation for a long period of time. Once the array formation was activated, it would consume a lot of resources. At this time, Chu Xiu subconsciously flipped through the information that Mei Qinglian handed him. Apart from information about the Blissful Devil Palace, there was also information about the lower realm. In fact, there would be information about the lower realm sent to him every once in a while. This information should have been sent to him before he went to the Black Luo tribe. In the end, because Chu Xiu suddenly went to the Black Luo tribe, he was delayed and didn't see this information. Chu Xiu glanced at it. There was a piece of information that was extremely eye-catching. A conflict broke out between the West Chu World Alliance and the Windcloud Sword Tomb. Chen Qingdi severely injured the Windcloud Sword Tomb's mystic and lightning realm powerhouse, Sword Venerable Zhongli Mu, with one punch. Chu Xiu pointed at the information and said, "When did this happen? What exactly happened?" Mei Qinglian glanced at the information above and said, "Oh, it's this. It happened a few days ago. The World Alliance is actually quite law-abiding. It has always been that we don't offend others if they don't offend us. However, a few days ago, Chen Qingdi's disciple, Xia Xiaolu, had some conflict with a younger generation disciple of the Windcloud Sword Tomb who entered the Longhu list." "Are you sure it's Xia Xiaolu?" Although Chu Xiu hadn't seen Xia Xiaolu for a long time, he still knew Xia Xiaolu very well. This person was a very proud person. The current Xia Xiaolu should be at the real pellet state. He no longer belonged to the youngest generation of martial artists. The Longhu list had been updated for 2 generations. What conflict could he have with the younger generation martial artists? He should be disdainful of bullying the younger generation. It seems that the younger generation martial artist of the Windcloud Sword Tomb spoke ill of the World Alliance, and he was punished by Xia Xiaolu. Later, his master came, and he was also defeated by Xia Xiaolu. But in the end, he provoked an elder of the Windcloud Sword Tomb, who seriously injured Xia Xiaolu. Then, he angered Chen Qingdi, who personally went to the Windcloud Sword Tomb to demand an explanation. Chu Xiu nodded. This was in line with Chen Qingdi's character. Normally, Emperor Chen Qing seemed to be very strict with Xia Xiaolu, looking down on this person, looking down on that person. Basically, he mainly dealt a blow to Xia Xiaolu, giving him a setback education. But in fact, Chen Qingdi was still very protective of his disciples. "Only I can beat my disciple. If others dare to move, they will die." How many punches did Chen Qingdi use to defeat Zhongli Mu? Mei Qinglian's expression was a little strange. 2 punches, to be precise, it was 1 punch. The first punch shattered the Windcloud Sword Tomb's sect protection formation, and it directly alarmed Zhongli Mu. Chen Qingdi directly said, "You beat the younger one, and the older one came. I'll be more direct, and beat the oldest one. I don't believe that the dead of the Windcloud Sword Tomb will climb out of their graves to find trouble with me." After saying that, Chen Qingdi only used 1 punch, and Zhongli Mu vomited blood. After hearing Mei Qinglian's words, Chu Xiu was shocked, and everyone else present also had the same reaction. Sword Venerable Zhongli Mu, the personal disciple of the Sword Sovereign Shen Kangwu 500 years ago, was in existence at the peak of the heaven and earth profound understanding realm. When he became famous in the pugilistic world, Wuxia could only be considered a junior who had just entered the pugilistic world. This person had not appeared for 100 years, and the last time he appeared was when Chu Xiu rebuilt the Kunlun devil cult. He joined hands with the righteous martial world to threaten Chu Xiu. At that time, although Zhongli Mu did not make a move, but Chu Xiu and the others could be sure that the other party definitely had a certain level of combat power, and was definitely not old to the point that he could not move. But now, he was seriously injured by Qinqing Di with one punch. What level of cultivation did Qinqing Di reach? Chu Xiu touched his chin. It seemed that Qinqing Di should have broken through again. In the whole pugilistic world, there were actually only two people who practiced the true fire body refining. One was Chu Xiu, and the other was Qinqing Di. Chu Xiu was only a subsidiary, and for him, the true fire body refining was only a method to increase combat power and physical strength. Qinqing Di was even more extreme. He directly gave up the normal path of cultivation and took the path of body refining. In short, Qinqing Di was no longer considered to be in the true fire spirit refining realm. Even if he broke through, he would not be in the mysterious realm of heaven and earth, nor would he have a domain, but he had a combat power that could match it. If they were to talk about resemblances, then Emperor Qinqing Di was rather similar to the berserkers from the celestial absolute heaven. However, he was 100 or even 1,000 times more powerful than them. That was because the path he had taken was a path without a path. He had to overcome all obstacles on his own. Chu Xiu suddenly said at this time, "Now that we are trapped here, as long as we move, Xianxia and the others will definitely make a move. If we don't repel them, my previous arrangements in the southern barbaric land will be in vain. I want to go to the lower realm to find support. What do you think?" Everyone present immediately reacted to who Chu Xiu was looking for. Qinqing Di? Chu Xiu nodded. Wuxia said in a deep voice, "It's not impossible to find Qinqing Di, but first you have to determine whether Qinqing Di can be trusted. Also, are you sure that Qinqing Di can deal with that Xianxia?" Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, "For so many years, you should have heard about Qinqing Di. Qinqing Di may be simple and crude, and his actions are also overbearing, but he has never done anything that goes against faith. At least in terms of morality, what Qinqing Di does is better than most of the so-called righteous people. Of course, this is just my opinion. Whether Qinqing Di can be trusted, to be honest, I don't have absolute confidence, but Xia Xiaolu can be trusted. For his disciple, I think he will not fall out with me. I have 80% confidence in this matter. In fact, with Chu Xiu's character, he wants to have 99% confidence in anything. The last point is up to the will of the heavens. But now it has to be said that Xianxia did not attack Jianghu County, but besieged Chu Xiu's stronghold in the south. He accidentally hit Chu Xiu's Achilles heel. If Xianxia went to Jianghu County, Chu Xiu might use the southern region's invasion of the eastern region as an excuse to do something, or he might not even care about the governor's office. But Chu Xiu couldn't give up the stronghold in the south no matter what. So let alone 80% confidence, even if it was only 50%, Chu Xiu would still do it. Knocking on the table, Chu Xiu continued, "There is also Qinqing Di's strength. I feel that he is stronger than you think. This cultivation method of true fire body refinement is a path that no one has ever taken before, so don't bring it into the normal cultivation method. In the case of Qinqing Di's normal true fire spirit refinement, 90% of true fire spirit refinement martial artists can't even take one punch from him. Even Elysium divine generals can't take more than a few punches from him. Now that he has broken through, it is not the heaven and earth mysterious realm. However, a heaven and earth mysterious realm powerhouse who was once famous in the pugilistic world couldn't even take one punch from him. You can imagine this power. I have already fought with Xianxia, and I can feel his strength. When I go to invite Qinqing Di, I will also test his strength. If he really has the strength to fight with Xianxia, then I will say these things." Wuxia and the others nodded. As long as Chu Xiu was confident, it was fine. The Kunlun devil cult, or rather, Chu Xiu's plan, had always been like this. Sometimes, when Chu Xiu proposed a very bold plan, although they didn't agree with it, they would fully cooperate with it and execute it. They thought that what they agreed with and trusted was Chu Xiu himself, and not the crazy plan. They believed that no matter how bold the plan was, in Chu Xiu's hands, there was a possibility of success. Chapter 1198. Chu Xiu had already decided to go down to the lower realm and ask Qingqing for help. However, he had other plans for the Daoist side. Qingqing could deal with Xianxia, but the people from the blissful demon palace had to be defeated as well. In fact, Chu Xiu wasn't weak in the Daoist side. The elites of the Kunlun devil cult were almost all in the Daoist side. If they were all released, they wouldn't be afraid of a branch of the blissful demon palace. However, these were his people, his trusted subordinates that he had painstakingly nurtured. It would be a waste if they were sacrificed at this time. Therefore, Chu Xiu could only think of other ways. Since this was the southern barbarian land, the matter would fall on the heads of the southern barbarian tribes. Chu Xiu found Green Jade and said to her, "The people from the blissful demon palace once captured the warriors of the tribes near the southern region and conducted all kinds of evil experiments. However, because you barbarians rarely communicate with each other, the barbarian tribes near the eastern region don't know about this. Now, I want you to send someone to inform the barbarian tribes and ask them to join forces to resist the blissful demon palace. However, this matter is very dangerous. We are surrounded by warriors from the blissful demon palace. Although they are mainly monitoring us warriors, barbarians don't have vital energy and won't be easily discovered, there is still a certain degree of risk. Who do you think is qualified to handle this matter?" If this happened in the Daoist sects, they would definitely first carefully verify the matter to see if it was true. Then, they would think about all kinds of things, shirk responsibility, and even oppose in secret. They would have to wait until the Daoist side clearly explained the pros and cons, and even offered sufficient benefits before they would be willing to join forces and attack. However, this matter was much simpler when it came to the barbarians. There weren't so many tricks. As long as the people from the Black Luo tribe went to the tribes and told them about this matter, and swore on their ancestors and gods, the other side would definitely believe them. The barbarian tribes were almost all straightforward people and wouldn't lie. In addition, they swore on their ancestors and gods, who were more important than their own lives. This made it even more impossible for it to be fake. Green Jade nodded and said, "Don't worry, Sir Divine Envoy. The warriors of the Black Civ tribe aren't afraid of death. I'm just afraid that we won't be able to complete the mission that Sir Divine Envoy has given us. I'll go make arrangements right away. The more people we have, the higher the chances of us breaking out of the encirclement." Chu Xiu nodded. Green Jade would handle such a small matter. After saying that, Chu Xiu immediately went to the lower realm. At this time, outside Chu Xiu's stronghold, the people from the blissful demon palace had already surrounded him. Ming Xuanyu looked at the stronghold in front of him, which was protected by layers of formations, and asked, "Are you going to storm it? Let me make this clear. If we storm it, the power of this formation isn't weak. You go first, and I'll make my move after breaking the formation. I can't let the disciples of the blissful demon palace throw away their lives." Xianxia snorted coldly and said, "Don't worry, we won't storm it for the time being. We'll just wear them out. I don't believe that they can maintain such a powerful formation all the time. Even the headquarters of the Imperial Sky Pavilion wouldn't be so extravagant." Although that was what Xianxia said, he was puzzled. He had always felt that this Chu Xiu was a little strange. Not only was he strange, but the things he did were also very strange. For example, this formation in front of him. He really couldn't understand what Chu Xiu was thinking. He didn't even make such a big formation for the county governor's mansion in Jianghu County. Instead, he built such a big stronghold in this desolate and uninhabited land of the southern barbarians and set up so many powerful formations. What was he trying to do? Could it be that the Imperial Sky Pavilion was preparing to attack the southern barbarians? Of course, Xianxia just casually thought about these things and didn't delve into it. For the current him, he only wanted to capture Chu Xiu and interrogate him about the whereabouts of Moriha. Whether he was dead or alive, a dignified palace master of the Sanskrit sect had to give him an explanation, especially when the other party was the palace master of his own Vishnu palace. Lower Realm, West Chu, Heaven Alliance. The Heaven Alliance wasn't in the prefecture of West Chu, but in a huge valley plain. Standing in front of the Heaven Alliance, Chu Xiu suddenly felt that the ancestors of Qinqingdi and High Firmament City would definitely have a common language. Their architectural styles were exactly the same. They were all big and incomparably magnificent, especially the palace where Qinqingdi was. It was obviously only one floor, but the foundation was more than 10 feet high. It was as if he liked to stand on a high place and look down. The current Chu Xiu could be said to have truly achieved the status where everyone in the world didn't know him. Even if he didn't have a relationship with Xia Xiaolu, he was still invited into the Heaven Alliance politely. After Xia Xiaolu heard the news, he immediately came out to greet Chu Xiu. When he was young, his temperament was relatively cold and he didn't talk much. These years, perhaps because he started to gradually take over the affairs of the Heaven Alliance, and because he hadn't seen his old friend Chu Xiu for a long time, he was very cordial. Brother Chu, actually, when I heard that you came back, I wanted to go to Kunlun Mountain to visit you. But unfortunately, the position of my Heaven Alliance is special. If I go, it won't be good. The Heaven Alliance was not a righteous path or a demonic path. When Chu Xiu came back, a group of people came to persuade Chu Xiu to repent. But in the end, he came to talk about the old days. It was indeed very awkward. You and I don't need to explain these things. In this world of big battles, actually, it's not easy for the Heaven Alliance to be able to remain neutral. Xia Xiaolu sighed and said, yes, it's not easy. Previously, Xia Xiaolu didn't participate in the messy affairs of the Heaven Alliance, so he didn't have such deep feelings. Only when Xia Xiaolu started to truly participate in the management of the Heaven Alliance did he know how difficult it was. The martial world is divided into righteous and demonic paths. Since the Heaven Alliance doesn't occupy either side, it's possible that both sides will come to find trouble with you. Therefore, the reason why the Heaven Alliance was able to last until now was because of Qinqingdi's powerful strength. Oh right, Brother Xia, is Alliance Leader Chen in the Heaven Alliance? Xia Xiaolu nodded and said, Master is inside, I'll bring you to see him. In fact, Chu Xiu hasn't seen Qinqingdi for a long time. Ever since the war between righteous and demonic paths started, the righteous and demonic paths started to fight each other. Qinqingdi led the Heaven Alliance to maintain a neutral position. Because of his strength, no one was bored enough to provoke him. Therefore, Qinqingdi spent most of his time cultivating and hasn't appeared in the martial world for a long time. In fact, many of the Heaven Alliance's matters were managed by Xia Xiaolu. Of course, sometimes Qinqingdi would bring Xia Xiaolu to watch the show, just like when Chu Xiu destroyed the Sabodhi monastery. However, Qinqingdi only watched and didn't participate. He was very low-key. Now that he saw Qinqingdi, Chu Xiu could feel that Qinqingdi had indeed broken through. His physical strength had even reached a level that Chu Xiu couldn't comprehend. Qinqingdi's body now contained an explosive power. The power in every muscle he exposed shocked Chu Xiu. At this moment, Chu Xiu felt like he was looking at a walking fierce beast in human form. Qinqingdi sat on a chair and laughed, saying, Great sect leader Chu, why do you have time to come to my Heaven Alliance? You don't come here for no reason. You definitely didn't come here to reminisce. Tell me, what's the matter? Chu Xiu smiled and said, Alliance leader Chen, you're making fun of me. Brother Xia and I are brothers. In front of Alliance leader Chen, I don't dare to call myself sect leader. However, I heard that Alliance leader Chen has stepped into a new realm. It just so happens that I've cultivated the true fire body refinement technique before. Therefore, I would like to ask Alliance leader Chen for some guidance. A faint smile appeared on Chen Qingdi's face. Oh, you want to spar with me? Sure. Previously, when I saw you fight with Rama, you used all kinds of techniques. It made me very envious. Today, I can see it for myself. If an ordinary junior had asked Chen Qingdi for guidance, Chen Qingdi would have directly punched him. Guidance your grandma. You don't deserve it. However, Chu Xiu was different. After destroying the North and South Buddhist sects, Chu Xiu was now a supreme figure in the pugilistic world. At the very least, his fame was greater than Chen Qingdi's. As the two of them spoke, they walked towards the martial arts arena behind the Heaven Alliance. Xia Xiaolu was dumbfounded as he followed behind the two of them. Until now, he still couldn't figure out what was going on between the two of them. They only exchanged a few words. Why did they start fighting? On the martial arts arena, Chen Qingdi said indifferently, "Get ready. My punch isn't that easy to receive." Chu Xiu nodded. Chen Qingdi didn't stand on ceremony. In the next moment, his fist had already smashed down. When the fist was unleashed, the wind and clouds dispersed. In front of that fist, all the power vanished into thin air. It wasn't because this fist had some special ability, but because under such pure power, even the heaven and earth Yuan Qi couldn't withstand such a powerful pressure. The array on the martial arts arena had just lit up when it was extinguished. Wherever the fist passed, the earth and rocks were sent flying, as if an earth dragon was flipping over. Xia Xiaolu, who was watching from afar, twitched his mouth. Master, did he forget that this was his own home? When Chen Qingdi punched out, Chu Xiu already knew Chen Qingdi's true strength. This was a punch of physical strength to the extreme. Even Lu Fengxian's physical strength after erupting with unparalleled strength couldn't compare to the power of Chen Qingdi's punch. Breaking through the array, a biting cold saber light tore through the void. At the same time, the god domain spread out. The five elements and yin and yang distorted, tearing apart all the power. However, it couldn't distort the body that was as strong as a fierce beast. A thunderous sound rang out. Chen Qingdi's punch not only tore apart Chu Xiu's domain, but also completely shattered his saber light. In the next moment, heaven's cry blood rain fell from the sky. The demon god's giant hand reached out and grabbed Chen Qingdi's fist. In an instant, the two forces were in a deadlock. However, after 3 breaths of time, the demon god's giant hand began to crack. Fortunately, when the great compassion mantra dissipated, the power of Chen Qingdi's punch was finally exhausted. Just as he was about to punch again, Chu Xiu suddenly said, "Stop. I'm not fighting anymore." Chapter 1199. With just one punch, Chu Xiu more or less knew Chen Qingdi's strength. The path of true fire body refinement was countless times more difficult than normal martial arts cultivation, but once there was a breakthrough, it would also be countless times more powerful. Before Chen Qingdi broke through, he could practically kill a true fire spirit refinement expert with one punch. Now that he broke through, he could also kill a heaven and earth mysterious realm expert with one punch. This kind of battle strength seemed to not exist in the early and middle stages. As long as he broke through, he would be at the peak. At this moment, Chen Qingdi was a little depressed and said, "Kid, why aren't you fighting anymore? I know that you are still far from your peak strength. Last time, I fought with that old guy from Windcloud Sword Tomb, but it was very unpleasant. That old guy has a false reputation, and he couldn't beat him, so he had to use the trump cards of Windcloud Sword Tomb. Boring, not satisfying." Chu Xiu smiled and said, "If Alliance Master Chen wants to satisfy himself, I can give you this opportunity. This time, I came to find Alliance Master Chen because I actually have a very important matter to tell you. Hearing Chu Xiu say this, Chen Qingdi's face also showed a touch of solemnity. Oh, what is it? Chen Qingdi started from scratch and built such a huge foundation of the World Alliance, so naturally, he was not a simple brute. Right now, Chu Xiu was the sect master of the Kunlun Devil cult, a person who ruled over the world. For him to specially come here to tell him an important matter, it could be imagined how important this matter was. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "This matter is of great importance, let's find an absolutely safe and hidden place to talk." Chen Qingdi waved his hand and brought Chu Xiu and Xia Xiaolu to a secret room, and said in a deep voice, "Can you say it now?" Chu Xiu nodded and said with a solemn expression, "This matter concerns a very big secret of mine. I came to tell you this because I have something that I need your help with, Alliance Master Chen. Furthermore, I believe in Brother Xia and Alliance Master Chen's character. Regardless of whether Alliance Leader Chen agrees to this or not, please don't spread this news." Chen Qingdi waved his hand and said, "You don't have to worry about that. Let's not talk about your relationship with my family's brat. I, Chen Qingdi, am not the kind of person who talks too much." Chu Xiu nodded and said, "Do you know where I went when I disappeared for a year?" Xia Xiaolu couldn't help but ask, "Where did he go?" Chu Xiu said solemnly, "He went to another world." After saying that, Chu Xiu told Chen Qingdi everything about the Daoist. Apart from the core matters like Dugu Weiwei, he didn't hide anything else. After hearing that, Xia Xiaolu's jaw dropped. He had an expression of shock on his face. He was so shocked that he couldn't say anything. Even Chen Qingdi was unable to maintain his calm. He too had an expression of shock on his face. The existence of the Daoist, another world. To a cultivator like Chen Qingdi who came from a humble background and did not know much about the ancient era, this came as a huge shock. Chu Xiu paused for a moment to allow the two of them to digest the information. Then, he said, "That's why I came here this time. I want to ask Alliance Master Chen to help me get out of this predicament and repel that half-step martial immortal from the Sanskrit school. At the same time, as a price, Alliance Master Chen and Brother Xie can freely travel between the Daoist and the lower realms. Even the elites of the World Alliance can enter the Daoist to train. However, they can't move about freely. You can only tell them that it's a mysterious realm and they can only stay there to train. What do you think of this condition, Alliance Master Chen?" After a long while, Chen Qingdi knocked on the table and said, "Truth be told, you're actually trying to make me your fighter. However, I have no reason to refuse your condition." To Chen Qingdi, the origin energy of heaven and earth within the Daoist was actually not very useful to him. True fire tempering one's body, not absorbing the origin energy of heaven and earth to accumulate power. Thus, it was not very useful to Chen Qingdi. However, to be able to fight against a half-step martial immortal was very tempting to the current Chen Qingdi. After making his breakthrough, Chen Qingdi actually possessed the strength to be ranked on the sovereign list. However, to be honest, there were not many in the lower realms who could fight against him. As for Chu Xiu, he was on the same side. Thus, he could only spar with him. The old celestial master had concealed his strength very well. Even when he fought against Yi Xiaonan back then, he did not use his full strength. However, the World Alliance did not have any conflicts with the Celestial Master Mansion. Why would he go to Longhu Mountain and fight the Celestial Master Mansion to the death? Yi Xiaonan was strong enough. However, he was in closed-door training. The only ones left were the two from the Heavenly Gate and the Sky of Freedom. Chen Qingdi knew that he would not be able to defeat those two. If he were to fight them, he would not be accumulating battle experience. According to Chu Xiu, there were many Daoist cultivators who had reached the half-step martial immortal realm or the peak of the profound opening realm. It would be enough for him to display his strength. Furthermore, the Daoist was very useful to Xia Xiaolu and the other cultivators of the World Alliance. In the entire World Alliance, only Qingdi walked the path of body tempering with true fire. Even Xia Xiaolu did not walk that path. Thus, the environment of the Daoist was most definitely a treasure trove for them. After they were done, Chu Xiu immediately brought Qingdi to the Daoist. The instant they stepped into the Daoist, Qingdi and Xia Xiaolu could not help but be dumbfounded. They sighed in admiration at how powerful the spiritual energy of the Daoist was. After they were done sighing, Chu Xiu brought the two of them out to meet Wei Shuya and the others. Qingdi knew the people from the Kunlun devil cult. Especially Xia Xiaolu and Lu Fengxian, they were good friends. After a long while, Xia Xiaolu forced a smile and said, "Right now, I feel sorry for those people from the righteous sections. He's still plotting against you, guarding against you and setting up a trap, but you've already started to fight in another world. This is simply unreasonable." From Xia Xiaolu's point of view, those people from the righteous sects in the lower realm were simply pitiful. They had secretly plotted all sorts of schemes, but in the end, Chu Xiu had no intention of playing along with them. Their starting points were already different, so how could they still play? Qingdi waved his hand and said, "All right, enough nonsense. Where is that guy you were talking about?" Chu Xiu said in a low voice, "He's just outside. After surrounding us for so many days, they're probably getting a little impatient. Now is the time to deal with them all at once." At this time, outside Chu Xiu's stronghold, Xianxia and Ming Xuanyu were still guarding it. In fact, they were not impatient. Xianxia had time, and Ming Xuanyu had even more time after receiving the benefits. Originally, they were still waiting for Chu Xiu's formation to run out of energy. In the end, who would have thought that the formation's light would dissipate in the next moment? Ming Xuanyu and Xianxia looked at each other. Was Chu Xiu finally unable to bear it any longer and wanted to fight with them? The two of them immediately led their people over to surround them. Seeing Chu Xiu and the others walk out of the formation, Xianxia said coldly, "Chu Xiu, are you prepared to surrender without a fight? Obediently return with me and tell me everything about Moriha. I won't touch your subordinates. But if you don't know how to appreciate kindness, let alone the people in your stronghold, you won't even be able to protect Jianghu County." However, at this time, Xianxia strangely discovered that Chu Xiu's people did not seem to be afraid at all. When facing them, they seemed to have a card up their sleeve. This made Xianxia puzzled. Could it be that they had something to rely on? Chu Xiu's side did not respond to Xianxia. Standing beside him, a rough-looking man pointed at Xianxia and said with an accent that made Xianxia feel very uncomfortable, "Are you talking about that shiny monk?" Xianxia was stunned. What the hell was a shiny monk? Just as he was about to say something, he saw Chu Xiu nod. Following that, the burly man also nodded, "All right, then leave this guy to me." Xianxia was about to say that the other party was boasting shamelessly, but in the next moment, the burly man had already made his move. With a punch, the extreme strength of his physical body shook the void. Everything in front of Xianxia began to distort. This was a powerful sense of oppression brought about by absolute power. Xianxia's eyes suddenly widened. Where did this monster come from? Even the experts from the top sects of the southern region, the Battle God sect, could not possibly have this level of physical strength. He formed a seal with his hands and a great sun rose behind him. With a scorching power that could melt everything, it smashed towards Qingdi with a loud bang. Although Sanskrit was also considered a branch of Buddhism, in reality, the cultivation methods of Sanskrit were like Buddha but not Buddha, like devil but not devil, leaning towards evil and strange. Just look at Moriha's illusions and Chu Xiu's world annihilation fire. However, only the cultivation method of solar divine palace that Xianxia cultivated was open and aboveboard. It exerted the power of the sun to the extreme and could be said to be fierce and imposing. However, in the face of Qingdi's powerful punch, he was the only one in the world. So what if it was the great sun? With one hand, he could pluck the moon and pluck the stars. Even if it was the sun, he could also shatter it with a single punch. With a loud bang, the scorching fireball was directly shattered by Qianxingdi's punch. The true sun fire that could smelt divine weapons smashed onto his body, but it could not even burn through his skin and flesh. Xian Jialuo's expression changed. The Sanskrit Buddhist seal in his hands bloomed and blocked in front of him. However, in the next moment, he was sent flying hundreds of feet away by Qianxingdi's punch and smashed into the ground, creating a huge crater. At this time, Chu Xiu was not idle either. The destruction formation in his hand slashed towards Ming Xuanyu with a sharp edge that seemed to tear the heavens and earth apart. This person was also in existence at the peak of the heaven and earth elemental enlightenment realm, so it was naturally up to him to deal with him. There were still 2 heaven and earth elemental enlightenment realm experts in Ming Xuanyu's Bliss Demon Palace branch. Wei Shuya and Shang Tianliang each faced one of them. Under Green Jade's orders, the members of Black Civ tribe roared and rushed towards the Bliss Demon Palace martial artists. Because He Jie was too heavily injured, he did not participate. At this moment, the 2 sides were already engaged in a fierce battle. Chapter 1200. Xian Jialua was still in a daze. This was because before he came to find Chu Xiu, he had already obtained detailed information on Chu Xiu from Linghu Immortal Mountain. He believed that he had a good understanding of Chu Xiu. But now, an unfathomable fellow had suddenly appeared near Chu Xiu's group and sent him flying with a single punch. Anyone with this kind of power could not be a nameless figure even in the entire Daoist world. Who was this person? Before Xian Jialua could react, Qianxingdi had already charged at him again. He glanced at the scorch mark on his fist and raised an eyebrow. These Daoist fellows were indeed extraordinary. They had some real skills to be able to injure him, although it was not even a superficial wound. Another punch fell. The powerful fist intent oppressed the surrounding space and made a series of explosions. There was no change. It was such a simple punch, but it was also a punch that had reached the pinnacle of power. With a loud bang, the scorching power of the sun turned into an arrow and exploded right in front of Qianxingdi. But he did not even try to block it. Instead, he punched again. The bow shattered, and Xian Jialua was sent flying. Xian Jialua was once again smashed into the ground, and even his internal organs were shaken. Damn it! Xian Jialua formed a Buddhist seal with his hands, and the image of a Buddha appeared behind him. It had 3 faces and 4 arms, and it held the sun in its hands as it smashed down on Qianxingdi's head. In an instant, the scorching light engulfed everything within 1,000 feet, so bright that it was difficult to keep one's eyes open. The earth could not withstand this powerful force, and sand and stones turned into lava. Xian Jialua panted heavily. He did not believe that his opponent could remain unscathed under this kind of power. However, in the next moment, a figure walked out of the blazing flames and punched out again. The fist intent was even mixed with a strong fighting spirit. Ha ha ha. Interesting, satisfying. Qianxingdi's body was scorched red by the scorching power, but this kind of solar true fire, which could melt gold and iron, could not melt his body, which had been tempered by true fire for countless years. Another punch landed, and Xian Jialua was sent flying again. This time, he really could not hold on any longer, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. On Ming Xuanyu's side, Chu Xiu had also exchanged blows with him. The Bliss Demon Palace was a major demonic sect, and Chu Xiu had seen their ruins in the lower realm. Their techniques were inclined towards the sinister, and Ming Xuanyu was the same. He did not know what technique he cultivated, but when he opened his domain, a domain that was filled with sinister qi appeared. However, this domain did not have any destructive power. Instead, he condensed countless evil ghosts and placed them into the domain. When combined with the domain, it increased the power of the domain by 30%. Chu Xiu had never seen this kind of strange technique that could be created by combining one's own technique and domain. However, it did not matter what kind of sinister ghosts they were. When Chu Xiu opened his god's domain, the 5 elements and yin and yang were inverted and twisted. Everything within the range of his domain was twisted into nothingness. Chu Xiu found Ming Xuanyu's domain very strange, but Ming Xuanyu found Chu Xiu's domain even more strange. He had never seen such a domineering domain before. In the end, a small half of the ghosts that he had painstakingly cultivated were directly dissipated, and this made Ming Xuanyu grimace in pain. With a loud shout, Ming Xuanyu retracted his domain, and a pitch-black long blade appeared in his hand. The entire blade was as black as ink, and only the blade had a hint of scarlet. As the blade slashed down, it actually began to devour all the power in the world, even light. Everywhere that the blade passed through was like a pitch-black eternal night. It was extremely strange. However, in the next moment, the breaking formation in Chu Xiu's hand was also unsheathed. The entire sky instantly lit up, illuminated by the sharpness of Chu Xiu's blade. Wherever the blade pointed, an endless amount of sharpness descended. The powerful force directly sent Ming Xuanyu flying. Even his sinister long blade let out a mournful cry. His saber could indeed absorb any kind of true qi. However, Chu Xiu's ethereal slash and the saber will of the breaking formula had brought out its sharpness to the extreme. It did not contain any kind of strange power, so how could he absorb it? In the next moment, the long blade in Chu Xiu's hand directly slashed down toward the ground, and the earth destruction of the 7 extremities was unleashed. In an instant, the ground trembled as if an earth dragon was turning over. Ming Xuanyu felt that something was wrong. He wanted to soar into the sky, but it was already too late. On the cracked ground, countless astral blades wrapped around him, making him look extremely wretched. When he finally managed to break free from the entanglement of the blade aura, a ghostly murmur rang out from Ming Xuanyu's body. Heaven weeps, blood rain fell, and the space above his head was torn apart. The shadow of a demon stretched out half of its body and directly grabbed at him. Ming Xuanyu's expression finally changed. He formed a seal with his hands, and black mist rose around him, turning into a huge storm of demonic qi that swept out. There were even endless wails of evil spirits within it, fighting against the great compassion mantra. Ming Xuanyu glanced at Chu Xiu, and a hint of fear appeared in his eyes. At the same time, he also wanted to retreat. The information that Xianxia had given him about Chu Xiu was very old, and in any case, he had severely underestimated Chu Xiu. Although he was not injured and had not used any trump cards, he did not want to continue fighting. Chu Xiu's series of attacks had somewhat exceeded his expectations. In a true life and death battle, even though he was already at the peak of the profound insight of heaven and earth, he still had no confidence in winning. When he looked at Xianxia again, he was even more shocked. The burly man on Chu Xiu's side was astonishingly powerful. Xianxia threw all sorts of secret techniques at him, but they were all crushed by the burly man with a single punch. No matter what cultivation technique or secret technique he used, he could not withstand a single punch from the burly man. He was smashed into the ground again and again, appearing extremely miserable. Xianxia had already reached the half-step martial immortal realm, and was even slightly stronger than him. If Xianxia were to lose, how could he continue fighting? At that moment, a series of battle cries rang out in the distance. A large group of barbarians had charged into the Bliss Demon Palace's formation and began fighting. Green Jade sent people to join forces with the barbarians, and the other barbarian tribes had finally arrived. Although they were a little late, they were not too late. Ming Xuanyu's expression completely changed when he saw this. He immediately shouted, "Retreat! All of you, retreat!" This kind of formation was no longer something he could withstand. If they continued fighting, his subordinates would definitely suffer heavy losses. As the people from the Bliss Demon Palace began to retreat, Xianxia, who had been suppressed by Qingqing all this time and had even been beaten to the point of vomiting blood, no longer hesitated. His figure moved, and a large amount of solar true fire erupted from his body. Like the sun rising from the east, he rapidly flew into the sky and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Qingqing chased after him, but speed was not his forte. He even grumbled gloomily, "We're in the middle of a good fight. Why are you running?" After Xianxialua and Ming Xuanyu escaped to a safe place, Xianxialua glared at Ming Xuanyu and shouted, "Ming Xuanyu, what is the meaning of this? It's already been 2 times, and each time, you've been the one to escape first. You've taken my things, yet you don't want to work for me?" Ming Xuanyu said indifferently, "Brother Xian, don't take out your anger on me after you've lost. Does it matter whether I ran or not? Chu Xiu's body is incomparably powerful. You didn't even have the slightest chance to retaliate. You've already lost, yet I'm still persisting. Apart from harming my subordinates, what's the point of this? To put it bluntly, the little things you've taken out aren't enough to make up for my losses." Ming Xuanyu's words were reasonable. He had already lost, so there was indeed no point in continuing the fight. However, Xianxialua couldn't swallow his anger. He had schemed for so long, and even paid a huge price to get Ming Xuanyu to act. Yet, in the end, he returned empty-handed. How could he accept that? Ming Xuanyu consoled, "Brother Xian, it's not that I want to criticize you, but with how powerful the Sanskrit Church is, why don't you go back and invite a martial immortal level hall master over? Wouldn't it be enough to forcibly take that Chu Xiu away? Why must you scheme against him yourself?" Xianxialua calmed down and let out a long sigh. "You make it sound simple, but do you know how serious the internal strife of the Sanskrit Church is? I'm not afraid of being laughed at by you, but the Brahma Palace, Shiva Palace, and Vishnu Palace have been fighting for thousands of years. If it weren't for the pressure from the Heavenly Treasure Temple, we might have already started fighting among ourselves. I was just about to take over the position of Palace Lord. Now that I've encountered such a situation that I can't resolve myself, I have to go back and ask someone to resolve it. Who can I ask? The old Palace Lord is already old. If he were to encounter other martial immortals after such a long journey, there might be an accident. The Shiva Palace and the Brahma Palace can help, but who will be the one to be humiliated in the end? It's the Vishnu Palace itself." Ming Xuanyu was slightly surprised. He didn't expect the internal strife of the Sanskrit Church to be so serious. Although the blissful demon palace also had internal strife and power struggles, it was kept to a tolerable degree. If it went too far, the palace lord would intervene. In the end, the internal strife of the Sanskrit Church had clearly reached a degree that would affect the interests of the Sanskrit Church. Yet, the 9th-level martial immortal of the Sanskrit Church still didn't care about it. It was unknown what he was thinking. "Brother Xian, if you don't choose to go back to the Sanskrit Church to ask for help, what are you going to do? It's not that I'm being immoral, but with just the 2 of us, we are definitely no match for Chu Xiu. Also, where did that sturdy man with a powerful physical body come from? It's impossible for someone like him to be a nobody." Xianxialua snorted coldly, "Chu Xiu has offended many people in the eastern region. The disciple of the Blood River Church's ancestor Blood River was crippled by someone on his side. Also, the enmity between Cold River City and them is not small. I'll think of a way to see if I can provoke." Before Xianxialua could finish his words, his expression suddenly changed. He took out a palm-sized formation plate from his bosom. The Sanskrit characters on it flickered. When Xianxialua finished reading the Sanskrit characters, his expression became extremely unsightly. Ming Xuanyu didn't understand Sanskrit. He asked in surprise, "What's wrong?" Xianxialua clenched the formation plate and let out a long sigh. He said, "Don't worry about Chu Xiu for now. The previous palace lord of the Vishnu Palace has passed away." After saying that, Xianxialua's figure moved. He used his fastest speed to head west. Chapter 1201. After repelling the people from the blissful demon palace, Chu Xiu's side heaved a sigh of relief. When Chu Xiu saw Ming Xuanyu leading his men to flee, he knew that the relationship between the blissful demon palace and Xianxia wasn't that close. They were merely united because of mutual benefits. Chu Xiu didn't know what method Xianxia had used to make the blissful demon palace help him. Now that Xianxia had been driven away by Qingqing, the blissful demon palace would naturally not take the initiative to provoke them. Qingqing shook his head as he walked over. He said, "Not bad. The strength of this Daoist cultivator is truly powerful. His path of martial cultivation is somewhat different from that of the lower realms. However, this person is simply too weak. The outcome of the battle has yet to be determined, yet he has already fled." Hearing Qingqing's words, everyone present was speechless. This was still considered the outcome of the battle to be determined? They had personally witnessed how Xianxia was crushed by Qingqing. It was truly a miserable sight. In such a situation, if Xianxia didn't flee, he would easily be hammered to death by Qingqing. Chu Xiu walked over and bowed to Qingqing. He said, "Alliance Master Chen, many thanks." Qingqing waved his hand and said, "There's no need to be so polite. You brought me to the Daoist, and I helped you eliminate your opponents. It's completely reasonable." "Oh, that's right, Chu Xiu, I'll leave that brat Xia Xiaolu with you for the time being. Help me look after him. I plan to travel around the Daoist and search for some inspiration to make a breakthrough. I'll also find someone to spar with." The corners of Chu Xiu's mouth twitched. Likely, that last bit was what Qingqing truly wanted. However, Chu Xiu still warned, "Alliance Master Chen, the Daoist Empire is different from the lower realms. There are countless experts in the eastern, western, southern, and northern regions. There are several martial immortal level experts in every region. It is best to be careful." Although Chu Xiu's ability to cause trouble was no worse than Qingqing's, Chu Xiu's and Qingqing's were two different things. Everything that Chu Xiu had done was either related to his interests or his reputation. As for Qingqing, he simply wanted to find someone to fight with, so he wanted to go out and have fun. He wasn't Chu Xiu's subordinate, so Chu Xiu naturally couldn't control him. He could only give him some advice. Qingqing nodded and said, "Rest assured, I know what I'm doing. Although I am a battle-hungry person, I am not brainless." After saying those words, Qingqing suddenly sighed. He said, "Truth be told, if you hadn't brought me to the Daoist Empire, I really wouldn't know what my next step would be." Chu Xiu was startled. Qingqing's current strength could already be considered to be at the half-step martial immortal realm. Furthermore, his physical body was very powerful, and his battle power was outstanding. What was he still confused about? Qingqing pointed to himself and said, "In the entire lower realms, I am actually the most special one. Although you also train in the true fire body refinement technique, I can tell that you have trained in a lot of things. There are many paths, and every single one of them will lead you to the pinnacle." Chu Xiu smiled bitterly. Having too many paths was not a good thing. When he was making a breakthrough to the profound access realm, he had felt confused because he had too many paths. Qingqing continued, "There are many paths that you can choose from. Yi Shaonan, the old heavenly master, and that old fart from the Ying family, or rather, all the existences in the lower realms that have reached the profound access realm know what path they should take. However, I am the only one who doesn't. Ever since I began training, I have known that no one will accompany me. I will have to do it alone. In the lower realms, I actually made a total of 3 breakthroughs. The first time was when I condensed my true fire body refinement realm. I failed to make a breakthrough to the true fire spirit refinement realm. In the end, I turned to body refinement and succeeded. That was the first time. The second time was not long after I fought against that Heavenly Gate Divine General that you killed. I reached major success in body refinement, and became invincible against those of the same cultivation. The third time was the one from before. I assimilated my body with the world, and was able to use the power of the world to fight against half-step martial immortals. These 3 times were all incomparably dangerous, and all of them were coincidences. So whether or not I can wait until the 4th breakthrough, when my fleshly body becomes a sage, which is comparable to an immortal's body, even I am not sure. The Daoist continent is incomparably vast, with countless experts. Whether or not I can take another step in the path of martial cultivation will depend on this. I have already instructed the World Alliance to keep a low profile. I will return in a year's time. However, if I don't return in a year's time, help me out a bit and let that brat Xia Xiaolu inherit the position of World Alliance Master. I have offended many people in the lower realms with my bad temper. When I am gone, there will inevitably be people who will cause trouble for the World Alliance. Hearing Qin Qingdi's parting words, Xia Xiaolu's eyes turned red. With a trembling voice, he said, "Master, Pow." Qin Qingdi directly hit him on the head and scolded, "I'm not dead yet, why are you crying for me? Cultivate properly here. When I return in a year's time, if you still haven't made a breakthrough, I will smash open your skull with a hammer and see why I took in an idiot like you." After saying that, Emperor Qin Qingdi took a step forward. Suddenly, there was an explosion in the air, and his figure disappeared. Xia Xiaolu let out a long breath and said, "Brother Chu, please arrange a place for me. I will go into closed-door cultivation right now." Chu Xiu patted his shoulder and said, "Don't worry. Alliance Master Chen established the World Alliance from scratch in the lower realms. He fought his way to where he is now, and the dangers he faced are no less than those in the Daoist continent. Since he was fine in the lower realms, it will be the same in the Daoist continent. Although the path he walked is powerful, he is destined to pay more than ordinary people." Xia Xiaolu shook his head with a bitter smile and said, "I'm not worried about my master, I'm worried about myself. If I really don't make a breakthrough in a year's time, with my master's temper, he will really beat me up with a hammer." Chu Xiu, after arranging for Xia Xiaolu to go into closed-door cultivation, Chu Xiu also began to arrange for others to reinforce the formations in this stronghold. After experiencing this matter, Chu Xiu actually felt a sense of crisis. Xianxia, a half-step martial immortal, and a blissful demon palace's sub-palace, had already caused such chaos here. They even had to find reinforcements from the lower realms. This was indeed quite difficult. Chu Xiu was also helpless against this kind of crushing strength. The Daoist continent had developed for tens of thousands of years, but how much time did they have for them to develop here? A few years or a few decades? Facing pure strength, other than steadily increasing one's own strength to resist, there was no other way. This kind of thing couldn't be taken lightly. Right now, the only thing that could be considered a trump card was Wei Shuya controlling the rootless sacred flame and pretending to be a martial immortal. To be honest, this move was very useful, but it could only be used once or twice. A fox could borrow the tiger's might, but only once. If it was used a few more times, the tiger's might would completely disappear. After giving these instructions, Chu Xiu didn't waste any time and directly prepared to go into closed-door cultivation. Right now, Chu Xiu's realm was very strange. Strictly speaking, his foundation in power was very deep, so when he stepped into the profound understanding of heaven and earth realm, he directly skipped the early stage of adapting to power and reached the middle and late stage. However, realm wasn't the same as battle power. His battle power far surpassed his realm. Apart from a half-step martial immortal like Xianxia, he didn't have absolute confidence in defeating him. He even dared to fight a peak profound understanding of heaven and earth realm existence like Mingxuanyu. Therefore, the current Chu Xiu was already qualified to reach out and touch that legendary martial immortal realm. As Chu Xiu formed hand seals, the power of his primordial spirit rapidly depleted. At the same time, in the High Heaven sect, the sect master of the High Heaven sect, Fang Yinglong, who was in seclusion, suddenly opened his eyes. He seemed to feel a trace of the power of his spirit trembling, but when he carefully examined it, it disappeared. Shaking his head, Fang Yinglong closed his eyes and continued to cultivate. With so many cultivators in the High Heaven sect, it was possible that someone was cultivating a secret technique related to the spirit, so it was normal for there to be some movement. At this moment, in the depths of the spirit cloud realm, Tianhun, who was tied to the bronze pillar, suddenly raised his head and revealed an indescribable smile. The power of his spirit began to move, and runes began to shine. In the misty space, Tianhun looked at Chu Xiu and said with a smile, "I didn't expect you to contact me so quickly. Did you encounter something troublesome, or did you encounter a problem in your cultivation?" Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "It's a matter of cultivation. I want to know what the martial immortal realm is, and how to reach it." In fact, Chu Xiu knew about the martial immortal realm. After all, there were many martial immortals lectures on the streets, and many of them were descriptions of the martial immortal realm. But it could also be said that Chu Xiu did not know. The things that were said in the lectures of the martial immortals, each person had a different appearance, and each person had a different understanding. Chu Xiu wanted to know what the true way to the martial immortal realm was. Tianhun pondered for a moment and said, "With your current realm, it's a bit too early to think about the martial immortal realm. But it's okay. You will step into this realm sooner or later. With your speed, it's fast. On the path of martial Tao, from tempering one's muscles and bones to comprehending the heavens and earth, from cultivating oneself to comprehending the world, there is actually no escape from the cage of this world. The heavens and earth will evolve into a domain. Within this domain, you are God. You are an existence that can share the same origin as the world. However, you can understand martial immortals like this. Martial immortals are existences that wish to transcend the world. The laws of the world say that snow cannot fall in summer, but martial immortals can make snow fall in June. They are not simply using their own power to control the weather, but to directly change the laws of this world. In simpler terms, they are using their own power to change the laws, distort the world. Tianhun said in a deep voice, "The word martial immortal is very vivid. Of course, when you are still in the cage of this world, even if you reach the heavens and earth profound understanding, you are still a human. However, when you attempt to transcend the world that you exist in, your level has already surpassed the category of human and become an immortal. In the 9 heavens of the path of martial Tao, every step is actually treading on the sky. When you reach the highest point and trample the entire sky beneath your feet, that is the true transcendence." Chapter 1202. It was the same thing, but everyone looked at it differently. A world in a flower. A world in a person's eyes. Perhaps it was because Chu Xiu was the earth soul of Dugu Weiwei. Even though he had lost all of his memories, Chu Xiu felt that the things that Tianhun told him were very similar to him. After a moment of silence, Chu Xiu suddenly asked, "Since martial immortals walk in the sky, and it has nothing to do with the power they cultivate, why are there so many martial immortals in the upper realm?" Tianhun chuckled, "Who said it has nothing to do with the power they cultivate? If you want to walk in the sky, you must first understand the sky. If you cannot stand shoulder to shoulder with the sky, how can you walk in the sky? The Daoist world's essence energy is more abundant, and martial cultivators are closer to the upper realm. As such, the chances of martial immortals being born here are higher than in the lower realm. Of course, it's not absolute. For example, Dugu Weiwei and Ning Xuanji. Over the past 10,000 years in the lower realm, there have been martial immortals in every generation. Surmounting the 9th layer of the martial immortal realm will allow one to transcend and become undying. Has anyone in this world reached the transcendent realm? Tianhun shook his head and said, "I don't know. At least, Dugu Weiwei did not know 500 years ago. But now, he knows that by gathering 3 source energies and entering the longevity heaven, he will be able to reach the transcendent realm. Right now, you and I are the stepping stones on his path to the transcendent realm. Do you want to reach the peak, or do you want to be a stepping stone? You must consider it carefully. If you don't hurry up, I'm afraid we can only be a stepping stone to help him transcend this world. As Tianhun finished his last sentence, the power of Chu Xiu's primordial spirit was slightly exhausted. Tianhuan's figure disappeared before Chu Xiu's eyes. Chu Xiu let out a long sigh. His gaze became much more determined, and he continued his seclusion. Chenqing Di had no path ahead of him, so he had to open up a path himself in order to reach the peak. However, Chu Xiu was different. He had many paths ahead of him, but what he lacked the most was time. He had reached the apex of the lower realm. Even in the celestial Daluo, he could be considered to be a character. However, even with that being the case, Chu Xiu was even more anxious than when he was in the lower realm. In fact, he was so focused on his cultivation that he even forgot to eat and sleep. Mei Qinglian and the others were stunned by that. They thought that Chu Xiu had been provoked by what happened with Xianxia and was preparing to go against the martial Immortal. However, in Chu Xiu, Xianxia, and the Sanskrit was, and the sect, and the Sanskrit. He was his only enemy, had only. Chu Xiu was. Chu Xiu. During the period of Chu Xiu's crazy cultivation, the power of Chu Xiu's subordinates also began to grow wildly. Groups of warriors from the Kunlun devil cult took turns to enter the Daluotian world to cultivate. After cultivating, they did not stay idle in the lower realm. The Kunlun devil cult had now controlled the northern Yen and the south. All kinds of resources in the south had been occupied by the Kunlun devil cult. As for the northern Yen, Mei Qinglian had sent a group of people to help the northern Yen suppress the martial arts sections. At the same time, they were also mining and excavating the extreme north. Although these places were bitter cold, it did not mean that they were not rich in resources. Otherwise, the great Guangming Temple would not have established a sect here. All kinds of mineral resources were mined and almost all of them were transported to the Daluotian world for Master Yuan Ji and Chaoying to build a formation. It was as if they wanted to build the stronghold in the south as the headquarters of the devil cult. It was even more solemn than the lower realm. After all, no one in the lower realm dared to touch the whiskers of the Kunlun devil cult at this time. 4 months later, on a small road at the junction of Kangwu County and Lingluo County, Lu Jianghe was sitting in a pavilion board. He was holding a jar of wine and waiting there, taking a sip from time to time. The entire Kunlun devil cult was very busy. Those who had the strength were busy cultivating in seclusion. Those who had the ability were busy arranging the construction of the stronghold, the formation, and so on. Lu Jianghe belonged to the category of those who had the strength, but he was not willing to cultivate, so he wandered around the entire Kangwu County. In the end, Mei Qinglian could not stand it anymore and let him be responsible for guarding the caravans of Kangwu County. The caravans of Kangwu County not only went to and fro the south, but also to other places. Among them, many caravans had to pass through Lingluo County. Lingluo County was now the territory of Cold River City, so they naturally had to be careful of the tricks of the people of Cold River City. Therefore, Mei Qinglian let Lu Jianghe come over to guard the caravans. Of course, this kind of thing was also very boring in Lu Jianghe's opinion. He could not wait for Cold River City to cause some trouble so that he could exercise his muscles and bones. It was a pity that although Cold River City sometimes did not abide by the rules, they did not intend to take action against the Emperor Sky Pavilion officially. They were too lazy to do these small tricks that could not be taken into public. At this time, Lu Jianghe, who looked leisurely, did not notice that a few miles away from him, in a tall building at the border of Lingluo County, someone was staring at him. The person who crippled you in Lingshao City last time is this person? He is the one who possesses that magical and evil blood refining secret method? The person who spoke was an old man wearing a blood-red robe. He had a sinister appearance and his eyes were blood-red, making him look extremely evil. His blood-red robe was even more bizarre. It was not purely blood-red, but as if there was a layer of blood flowing on it, as if it was alive. It was extremely bizarre. The old man was the leader of the Church of Blood River, Ancestor Blood River. Very few people remembered his real name. In any case, when he became famous in the eastern region, he was called Ancestor Blood River. In the eastern region, other than the martial immortal experts, the person with the greatest power was this person. The person standing beside him was Jianghu, who was almost sucked dry of all his blood and cultivation by Lu Jianghe in the martial arts gambling fight. Previously, although Lu Jianghe did not kill him, he still sucked dry all of Jianghu's blood and qi. To a cultivator like Jianghu who specialized in the power of blood and qi, it was almost equivalent to his cultivation being crippled. More than half a year had passed, but Jianghu had yet to return to his peak. He was still like a mummy. Although he still had the cultivation of the mysterious heaven and earth realm, if they were to really fight, he probably could not even defeat a cultivator of the true fire realm. It's this person. Staring at Lu Jianghe in the distance, Jianghu's eyes revealed a tinge of resentment. Ever since he was crippled by Lu Jianghe, his position in the Church of Blood River had plummeted. Even his juniors did not care about him. Even his master faintly felt that he was not important. However, it was fortunate that he brought a piece of news that allowed his master to not completely give up on him. That news was Lu Jianghe's cultivation technique. The cultivation technique passed down by Ancestor Blood River was already very powerful in the path of blood and qi. At least, that was what Jianghu thought. However, compared to Lu Jianghe, the cultivation technique of the Church of Blood River was really not presentable. The level of Lu Jianghe's cultivation technique was definitely one level higher than the cultivation technique of the Church of Blood River. Furthermore, if it wasn't for the fact that his cultivation technique countered Lu Jianghe, he wouldn't have lost so miserably the last time. He wouldn't have been crushed by Lu Jianghe. Therefore, he immediately told this news to Ancestor Blood River and encouraged him to attack Lu Jianghe and force him to reveal the cultivation technique. However, although Ancestor Blood River was tempted, Lu Jianghe did not leave the Cangnan residence after that period of time. This left Ancestor Blood River with no other choice. Although he was a figure in the Eastern Region martial arts circle and stood on the side of Cold River City, he was not arrogant enough to attack the prefectural governor's residence before the war between Cold River City and the Imperial Sky Pavilion. Although his strength was the same as Xianxia's, there was no Sanskrit behind him. It was only recently when Lu Jianghe came out to escort the caravan that he found an opportunity. Ancestor Blood River turned his gaze to Jianghu and said in a hoarse voice, "Are you sure that this person's cultivation technique is really so powerful that it far surpasses the level of the Church of Blood River? You have to know that he is Chu Xiu's man after all, and Chu Xiu is the prefectural governor of Jianghu County. If we touch his man in Jianghu County, it is equivalent to provoking the Imperial Sky Pavilion. Do you understand the implications of this?" Ancestor Blood River's eyes flickered with a cold light that penetrated into Jianghu's heart, causing him to tremble. He had stayed in the Church of Blood River for a long time and knew what kind of person Ancestor Blood River was. Although he was the eldest disciple of Ancestor Blood River and was the strongest, he was the most doted on previously. However, now that he was crippled, he was basically useless to the Church of Blood River, or rather, to Ancestor Blood River. At this moment, as long as he showed the slightest mistake, he had no doubt that his master would take away the last bit of blood essence from him. Jianghu clenched his teeth and said, "Master, I dare to use my life to guarantee that the cultivation technique on Lu Jianghe is definitely from the same source as the Church of Blood River. Furthermore, it is more powerful and mystical. As long as we can obtain that cultivation technique, the overall strength of the Church of Blood River will definitely skyrocket. Even if we offend the entire Imperial Sky Pavilion, it will be worth it." Upon hearing Jianghu's words, Ancestor Blood River snorted coldly and headed straight for Lu Jianghe. At this moment, Lu Jianghe was still drinking leisurely. However, the next moment, he immediately threw the wine jar aside and looked in a certain direction with a solemn expression. 500 years ago, he had followed Dugu Weiwei into battle. 500 years later, he had followed Chu Xiu and experienced many battles. He was extremely sensitive to killing intent. Someone was going to attack him. The next moment, two blood-colored figures landed. Ancestor Blood River was slightly surprised and said, "Your senses are quite sharp." The moment Lu Jianghe saw Yin Shueli, he knew that Yin Shueli was here to cause trouble. After taking another look at Ancestor Blood River, Lu Jianghe sneered and said, "What's the matter?" After beating up the young one, the old one came. "You can't beat me in the arena competition, so you brought an old man to cause trouble for me. Aren't you ashamed?" Chapter 1203. Lu Jianghe was someone who had seen much of the world. To be precise, he had once followed Dugu Weiwei to slaughter the entire righteous Jianghu. Of course, he would not be afraid of trash like Ancestor Blood River, who called him an old bastard in front of him. Ancestor Blood River's eyes revealed a touch of coldness as he said, "I hate people with foul mouths. Today, I'll give you a chance. Hand over your cultivation method, and I'll let you die a quick death." Lu Jianghe's eyes revealed a touch of understanding. It turned out that this old bastard was after his cultivation method. With a sneer, Lu Jianghe directly scolded, "A bunch of good-for-nothings from your Blood River cult, are you worthy of coveting my cultivation method? Are you worthy? You've cultivated for hundreds of years, yet you can't even understand the cultivation method. You've made a good power of qi and blood into a blood-sucking monster. Every one of you has cultivated until you're neither human nor ghost. What a joke. So what if you're a half-step martial immortal? Now you've come to snatch the cultivation method of a true fire spirit refinement realm warrior. Aren't you afraid of embarrassing your master? Oh, I forgot. I heard that you're the ancestor of the Blood River cult, right? The ancestor is a shameless old bastard. One can imagine what kind of trash the people below him are. A bunch of even more shameless trash. Why do you still want to cultivate martial arts when you're like this? You might as well drown yourself in a puddle of urine, lest others laugh at you." Before Lu Jianghe joined the Kunlun Devil cult, he was a pirate. He was a standard lowlife, and his mouth was very venomous. Ancestor Blood River and Yin Shueli were so angry that they were breathing heavily. Their eyes revealed a ferocious killing intent. "Boy, you're very good. After I dig out the cultivation method in your head bit by bit, I'll break your limbs and throw you into the blood prison." Before Ancestor Blood River could finish speaking, an extremely powerful force emerged from Lu Jianghe's body. In an instant, a blood-red light soared into the sky. Lu Jianghe's figure turned into a waterfall and fled towards Cangnan residence. At that moment, Lu Jianghe directly used the blood demon transformation technique to escape. After watching Chu Xiu use the blood demon transformation technique so many times, it was finally his turn. However, most of the time, Chu Xiu used this move to fight with his life on the line, while the first time Lu Jianghe used it, it was to escape. It wasn't that he was a coward. Rather, if he were to rush forward and risk his life against a half-step martial immortal, he would simply be an idiot. Although he had been sealed for 500 years, he still had many years that he had yet to enjoy. He did not wish to die here. Behind him, Ancestor Blood River and Yin Shueli both had dumbfounded expressions. Just now, Lu Jianghe had cursed them in front of their faces. He appeared to be incomparably unyielding, as if he was going to fight them to the end. None of them had expected him to escape just like that. It was so straightforward. However, that made Ancestor Blood River feel a sense of humiliation, as if he had been toyed with. "You're looking to die." Ancestor Blood River roared furiously and chased after Lu Jianghe. Yin Shueli also followed behind. However, his strength was already half crippled and he could not catch up to the two of them. After all, Ancestor Blood River was in existence in the half-step martial immortal realm. Although his cultivation method was not as profound as the Blood Demon Divine technique, his speed was still very fast when he used the simplest blood escape technique. Seeing Ancestor Blood River right behind him, Lu Jianghe cursed his bad luck in his heart. Back then, when he used the Blood Demon Divine technique in front of everyone, Lu Jianghe did not think so much. In his opinion, he had only crippled Yin Shueli. In the future, if the Blood Demon Church came looking for trouble, they might find the Royal Sky Pavilion or Chu Xiu. However, they would not find him. He had never expected that a large Daoist faction, although not the top-notch one, still had a half-step martial immortal, could be so poor that they even coveted his cultivation method. You run quite fast. However, no matter how fast you are, you will not be able to escape from my palm. Ancestor Blood River's blood escape technique exploded with extreme power. The boundless river of blood behind him flowed and enveloped Lu Jianghe. Lu Jianghe had already reached the half-step profound understanding of heaven and earth. At that moment, when he used the Blood Demon transformation technique, his power was even stronger than most profound understanding of heaven and earth existences. An endless mist of blood enveloped his body. However, the next moment, it turned into an extremely sharp blade and slashed the river of blood apart. Then, he continued to escape. Ancestor Blood River exclaimed in surprise. The river of blood that had just been torn apart healed rapidly and turned into countless tiny blood threads that hung behind Lu Jianghe. The tiny blood threads trembled. On one hand, they caused the surrounding essence of the heaven and earth to stagnate. On the other hand, they pulled at the blood in Lu Jianghe's body as if they wanted to pull all the blood out of his body. Lu Jianghe humphed coldly and formed hand seals. In an instant, Ancestor Blood River discovered in shock that the blood threads did not seem to be under his control. They all shattered and dissipated. Ancestor Blood River was not angry. Instead, he revealed an ecstatic expression. He did not have such a method to control his vital energy and blood. The thoroughly meticulous method was an extreme study of vital energy and blood. Ancestor Blood River had started from scratch. He was not from one of the top sections. He had only established the Blood River cult by relying on the remnants of the Blood River sect, an extinct ancient sect, as a foundation. The flaws in his cultivation method were too great. He had been a half-step martial immortal for a long time, but he had not broken through. This was not because of his strength, but because his martial path was not comprehensive enough. If he could seize this guy's cultivation method and integrate it into his own martial path, he might be able to reach a higher level and get a glimpse of the supreme realm of martial immortal. With that thought in mind, Ancestor Blood River laughed wildly. With a wave of his hand, a large amount of vital energy and blood stirred up the essence of the heaven and earth. It smashed wildly towards Lu Jianghe, causing him to vomit blood. Although the Blood Demon Divine technique was clearly a level higher than Ancestor Blood River's cultivation method and could dissolve the opponent's vital energy and blood, the difference in strength between the two was too great. Even if he did not use the cultivation method related to vital energy and blood, Lu Jianghe was no match for him. The two sides chased each other all the way to the outside of Cangnan Mansion. At this time, even Ancestor Blood River was a little anxious. He had also underestimated Lu Jianghe. His opponent's tenacity was simply beyond his imagination. Every time he thought that Lu Jianghe could not hold on any longer, he did not expect that Lu Jianghe would still be able to burst out with strength and continue to escape. Seeing that Lu Jianghe had escaped to the outside of Cangnan Mansion, Ancestor Blood River also knew that there were several heaven and earth mysterious realm experts guarding Cangnan Mansion. He did not have many chances. Ancestor Blood River snorted coldly. His vital energy and blood suddenly burst out and condensed into a blood arrow. Lu Jianghe still wanted to use the Blood Demon Divine technique to break down the blood arrow, but the blood arrow seemed to pass through space, directly passing through the void. The next moment, it had directly pierced through Lu Jianghe's heart. At that moment, blood splattered out, but Lu Jianghe forced himself to make a seal with his hands, and the blood that spilled out was taken back into his body. His speed actually increased by another level, and his figure instantly leaped into Cangnan Mansion. Ancestor Blood River's face was gloomy. He did not expect that Lu Jianghe's tenacity would be so strong. To be precise, Lu Jianghe had studied the path of vital energy and blood to the extreme. Vital energy and blood were vitality, so he could burst out with such tenacity. But the more it was like this, the more he desired Lu Jianghe's blood demon divine technique. But this time, he had let Lu Jianghe escape, and he had no chance. Ancestor Blood River could only leave unwillingly. At this time, in Cangnan Mansion, most of the people were in seclusion, and Mei Qinglian was still taking care of some chores. Suddenly, she felt a chaotic power with the smell of blood rushing in. Mei Qinglian immediately put down the things at hand and went out to check. As a result, she saw Lu Jianghe standing miserably at the gate. His breath was extremely low, and he was covered in blood. There was also a bloody hole in his chest. Seeing Mei Qinglian, Lu Jianghe grinned and said weakly, F***ck. I've suffered a big loss this time. As soon as his voice fell, Lu Jianghe lost consciousness and fell to the ground with a thud. His last thought was that no matter how strong a woman's cultivation was, she was not reliable. Why did Mei Qinglian's first reaction was to cover her mouth and cry out in alarm instead of helping him up, causing him to fall again? In the secret chamber of the prefectural governor's mansion, Feng Buping had been fiddling with Lu Jianghe's body for a long time. Chu Xiu and the others had already woken up from their seclusion. They looked at Lu Jianghe lying in the middle with a solemn expression. Seeing Lu Jianghe's miserable appearance just now, Chu Xiu was very angry, and so were the others. Although Lu Jianghe had a bad mouth and an unreliable character, it was undeniable that he had helped Chu Xiu a lot in the early days of Chu Xiu's cultivation. He was definitely Chu Xiu's most trusted confidant. Touching one of Chu Xiu's people was equivalent to slapping Chu Xiu's face. No matter who it was, they had to pay the price. After a long time, Feng Buping stood up and said, "Milord, Hall Master Lu is fine. Although his injuries are serious and anyone else would have died, Hall Master Lu's blood devil art is extremely magical. All of his vitality is dispersed into every drop of blood. So let alone a heart exploding, even if his head is cut off, he won't die as long as his true soul is not destroyed. However, he lost too much blood this time. I'm afraid it will take a long time for him to recover." Then why hasn't he woken up yet? Feng Buping thought for a moment and said, "Because the loss of blood is too serious, Hall Master Lu hid his true soul in his blood to protect it. This is a subconscious reaction to cultivating the blood devil art. After all, although the body is not important, the true soul is the most important. Now, we can either wait for a period of time until his body slowly recovers and his true soul feels that there is no danger, then it will naturally return. Or we can stimulate him and let his true soul awaken in advance." Chu Xiu nodded and said to Lu Jianghe loudly, "I hereby bestow Lu Jianghe the fifth demon sovereign of our holy church. He will be titled Blood Sea Demon Sovereign." Lu Jianghe, who was lying on the bed, did not have the slightest reaction. Chu Xiu frowned. "It doesn't work?" At this time, Mei Qinglian suddenly said softly, "Red Lotus Demon Sovereign is looking for you." Lu Jianghe, who was lying on the bed, suddenly twitched. He sat up like a carp and looked around. "Where is Red Lotus?" When he saw the surrounding crowd, Lu Jianghe finally realized where he was. He let out a long sigh and said in a resentful tone, "Next time, wake me up in a different way. Don't use Red Lotus Demon Sovereign as a joke." Chapter 1204. Although Lu Jianghe's injuries seemed to be very serious, and even his heart was shattered, everyone knew that he was fine when they saw that he was still in the mood to talk nonsense. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, who was the one who chased you? What trouble did you cause outside? When Lu Jianghe heard this, he immediately began to complain. What does this have to do with me? It's because you asked me to cripple Yin Shueli in the Lingshao City Martial Arts Exhibition. In the end, his master came looking for me and wanted to snatch my blood demon divine technique. That old bastard called Blood River Patriarch has the strength of a half-step martial immortal. How could I defeat him? It's already extraordinary that I was able to escape from him. In fact, Lu Jianghe was being modest. He was not good at other things, but his ability to escape was definitely stronger than his combat power. With that mouth of his, he had already offended quite a number of people before he joined the Kunlun Demon sect. After he joined the Kunlun Demon sect, there were countless experts of the righteous path who wanted to tear that mouth of his. The reason he could survive until now, other than the power of the Kunlun devil cult, it was also related to his ability to escape. A cold light flashed in Chu Xiu's eyes. Blood River Patriarch. You're courting death. Mei Qinglian asked, what do you plan to do this time? Chu Xiu said coldly, you have to look at the master before you beat the dog. Old Lu is injured to this extent, can we still sit back and do nothing? I can't afford to offend the Cold River City, but can I not afford to offend the Blood River cult? Since they are called the Blood River cult, I will really make their blood flow like a river. Actually, during this period of time, Chu Xiu had been a bit sullen. He had destroyed the North and South Buddhist sects in the lower realm and shocked the pugilistic world with his demonic might. But what about in the Daoist? First, he was threatened by the old guy Yi Weikong from the Cold River City. He relied on Wei Shuya's control of the rootless sacred fire to scare him. Later, Xian Jialua came to his door and joined forces with the Bliss Demon Palace to besiege his stronghold in the south. He still had to rely on Qinqing Di to help him out. When had he, Chu Xiu, ever been so passive and aggrieved? In addition, Chu Xiu knew his identity and knew that he was the greatest threat. Who knew when he would be swallowed by that legendary existence as a stepping stone? Although Chu Xiu had always been able to maintain an extremely calm and peaceful state of mind, when all these things were added together, Chu Xiu couldn't help but feel like he was about to explode. Chu Xiu did not know what others would do after their mental state exploded, but after Chu Xiu's mental state exploded, he only thought of one thing, and that was to kill. No one knew how the Blood River sect would feel when they bumped into Chu Xiu in such a state. At this time, Lu Jianghe felt that something was wrong. To be honest, when he woke up from his serious injuries, Chu Xiu and the others surrounded him with concern. This made him very touched. At least 500 years ago, he had not received such treatment. After all, with his mouth, even in the Kunlun devil cult, there were many people who annoyed him. Seeing that Chu Xiu was angry and wanted to help him take revenge, Lu Jianghe was also very touched. But the problem is, even though I'm touched, can't you use the right words? What did it mean to hit a dog? Why did these words sound so awkward to him? Lu Jianghe coughed and said that, before he finished speaking, he saw Chu Xiu waving his hand. Elder Wei, please take care of Kangwu County. City Lord Shang and the others will follow me to Blood River Patriarch. Also, tell Tangya, Yen Bugue, and the other elites of the holy cult who know about the Daoist incident to gather. This time, I will really make Blood River Patriarch bleed. Seeing that Chu Xiu rarely looked so serious, everyone present said in a low voice, yes. Chu Xiu's prestige could be said to be on full display at this moment. If it were Su Fengshan and the others, they would definitely advise Chu Xiu to calm down. After all, the Blood River sect was backed by Cold River City. Moreover, they were not within the Imperial Sky Pavilion's sphere of influence. If they acted rashly, there would definitely be repercussions. But if it were Mei Qinglian and the others, they would only follow every word Chu Xiu said, because they believed in Chu Xiu. No matter how crazy Chu Xiu's plan was, he would leave a way out for himself. Chu Xiu patted Lu Jianghe's shoulder and said, Old Lu, you should rest here first. Didn't Patriarch Blood River almost use up all the blood in your body? Wait here. Wait for me to suck out all the blood in that old thing's body, then make it up to you and help you take revenge." Although Lu Jianghe was very touched, he still struggled to get up and said, "Let's talk about dogs and their owners." Before he could finish his words, Chu Xiu waved his hand and brought his men away. At the same time, he instructed Feng Buping, "Divine Dr. Feng, old Lu's vitality has yet to recover. I'll have to trouble you to take care of him during this period of time." After saying that, Chu Xiu directly left the secret room with his people. Lu Jianghe's hand was stretched in the air, and he suddenly felt helpless. Feng Buping at the side, "Sect leader is really good to his dog. Oh no, to his people. Our holy sect is really blessed to have such a leader." Lu Jianghe glared at Feng Buping and said angrily, "Get out. I want to rest." Although Feng Buping's strength was far from Lu Jianghe's, he did not fear Lu Jianghe at all. Hearing this, he curled his lips and said, "What are you being arrogant for? If you are beaten up like this again, won't you still have to rely on me?" In the Kunlun devil cult, Feng Buping was an extremely special talent. He could cure diseases and refine pills. The entire Kunlun devil cult's alchemy system could be said to be single-handedly managed by Feng Buping. Therefore, although he was not conspicuous, he was extremely important in the Kunlun devil cult. If Master Yuan Ji was able to mix with a position by Chu Xiu's side because of his obedience and a part of his strength, then Feng Buping relied on 90% of his strength. As for Lu Jianghe, he was really not afraid. Looking at Feng Buping walking out with a look of contempt, Lu Jianghe couldn't help but feel depressed. Ah! The elites under Chu Xiu who knew the secrets of the Daoist had been trained since he was still in the Guanzhong torture room. There were not many of them, only a few hundred people. Some of them were martial artists from the Guanzhong torture room, and some were martial artists from the Yinma lineage, Blue Dragon Society, and Jianghu Hall. Anyway, these people came from a variety of backgrounds, but they could be said to have experienced hundreds of battles. They had even experienced the war between the righteous and demonic factions more than once or twice. Now, after being purified by the Daoist aura for such a long time, the weakest had reached the realm of unity of man and nature, which was very amazing. At the same time, their efficiency was also extremely fast. When Chu Xiu asked them to gather, they almost used the fastest speed to arrive at the Cangnan mansion from the stronghold of the southern barbaric land. Chu Xiu made such a big movement and took away so many people. Su Fengshan and others also noticed it. Although they didn't want to ask, Su Fengshan had to bite the bullet and ask, "Sir, you are..." Before Su Fengshan finished speaking, he was interrupted by Chu Xiu, "I'm going to kill people. You stay here and guard the county governor's mansion." After saying that, a group of people directly left the city with a frightening murderous aura. Su Fengshan was dumbfounded, but he didn't dare to say a word. He returned to the county governor's mansion dejectedly. The more he came into contact with this sir, the more he couldn't see through him, and he didn't dare to ask more. The experience of scheming against others in the Imperial Sky Pavilion for many years told him that in the face of Chu Xiu, it was enough as long as he was obedient. The Blood River Church wasn't within the territory of the Imperial Sky Pavilion or other big sects, but in the middle of the Imperial Sky Pavilion, Cold River City, and High Heaven Sect. The eastern region was so big that it was impossible for these big sects to control all the areas. Although the areas they controlled were treasures with the most abundant spiritual energy, for a sect like the Blood River Church, when choosing a sect, they would try their best to avoid the areas controlled by the big sections. In fact, the position of a sect like the Blood River Church was very awkward. If you said they were weak, the Blood River Church had one half-step martial immortal and 2 or 3 people in the profound understanding of heaven and earth realm. That kind of strength already surpassed 99% of the sections. In the entire eastern region, they could be counted as the best. But if you said they were strong, a sect without a martial immortal to oversee it wasn't too strong. Therefore, a sect like the Blood River Church had always had only two paths to take. One was to pass it down from generation to generation. Half-step martial immortal was not something that could be reached in every generation. If one generation failed to reach it, the sect would naturally decline. The other was to advance against the trend like the Cold River City and forcibly dig out a piece of meat from the mouths of the top big sections. Of course, this step could be said to be extremely difficult. Chu Xiu raised his head and looked at the blood-red mountain in front of him. His eyes flickered with ferocious killing intent. The blood-red mountain in front of him was the location of the Blood River Church. In fact, the mountain used to be an ordinary mountain. It was only because the world energy in this area was relatively dense that the Blood River Church turned it into a mountain. But perhaps Ancestor Blood River wanted to show off his strength, so he had people dye the mountain red. Moreover, he told others that when the Blood River Church fought for the mountain, the blood that flowed after the fierce battle had dyed the mountain red. In reality, when the Blood River Church occupied this place, there wasn't even a single person in this broken place. Who would fight with them? After a while, Chu Xiu waved his hand and said faintly, "Kill." In front of the mountain gate of the Blood River Church, two real pellet state disciples were guarding the mountain gate in boredom. In fact, it was enough to send a few young disciples to guard the mountain gate, but Ancestor Blood River wanted to save face, so he insisted that these real pellet state deputies take turns to guard the mountain gate. This had already made them a little resentful. At this time, the two suddenly saw hundreds of people coming with murderous intent. Their complexions suddenly changed, and they immediately shouted, "Who are you? Stop!" Chu Xiu stopped and glanced at the two. Just when the two of them were waiting for Chu Xiu to report his name, they were shocked to find that the blood in their whole bodies seemed to be out of control, and it was boiling crazily in their bodies. Before they could react, a "puchi" sound rang out, and the blood in their bodies was instantly sucked out, splattering all over the ground. Their corpses were twisted and shriveled like zombies. Chapter 1205. Chu Xiu was here to kill. There was no need to talk too much when it came to killing. Lu Fengxian and Mei Qinglian looked at each other, feeling slightly surprised. They were people who knew Chu Xiu better. Naturally, they knew that there was something wrong with Chu Xiu's current state. His murderous aura was too strong. Although Lu Jianghe was seriously injured, it was not that they looked down on Lu Jianghe. Lu Jianghe's position in Chu Xiu's heart was not that important. At least, it was not important enough to affect Chu Xiu's emotions. It seemed that Chu Xiu had been under too much pressure recently. It was so heavy that he needed a place to vent it. Looking up at the peak of the mountain, Chu Xiu said lightly, "Go up and destroy the sect." In an instant, a powerful murderous aura shot up into the sky. The entire Blood River sect was suddenly covered in dark clouds, shrouded in a powerful murderous aura. The martial artists of the Blood River sect were not blind or deaf when Chu Xiu caused such a commotion. Of course, they could feel it. Before Chu Xiu and the others reached the halfway point of the mountain, the entire Blood River sect's formation had been activated. Sect leader Shang, it's up to you now. Shang Tianliang nodded, and the withering field bloomed around him. When he walked in front of the formation, the mountain guarding formation of the Blood River sect began to operate crazily and overload. It glowed red, and its power was displayed to the extreme. The power of withering was unique to Shang Tianliang. It was related to time and the transformation of yin and yang. The 4 seasons withered and flourished. Everything could only function normally within a certain pattern. Now, although Shang Tianliang had made the mountain-protecting formation of Blood River cult erupt with its greatest power, in less than 10 breaths, the entire formation had already produced a series of cracking sounds. Clearly, it could no longer withstand the great burden and directly shattered. "How dare you!" Groups of martial artists rushed down from the peak of the mountain. The leader was a middle-aged man in the heaven and earth mystic realm. This person was called Duan Ling Kong, and he was the vice-sect leader of the Blood River sect. In fact, he was not a disciple of Patriarch Blood River. Instead, he had joined the Blood River cult halfway, but he had learned Patriarch Blood River's cultivation method. However, because he was already a famous figure in the Jianghu, an expert at the peak of heaven and earth elemental enlightenment, he had a status, so he didn't have a master. In addition, with the temptation of the position of vice sect leader, he brought some of his disciples and joined Patriarch Blood River in exchange for the position of vice sect leader. Who are you? How dare you barge into my Blood River cult and kill my people? Are you looking to die? When Chu Xiu was making a name for himself in the eastern region, Duan Lingkong spent most of his time in closed-door cultivation, so even though he'd heard of Chu Xiu's name, he didn't know Chu Xiu. However, what Chu Xiu replied to him was an extremely sharp and powerful saber light that seemed capable of tearing the entire mountain apart. The saber intent was so powerful that it seemed capable of tearing heaven and earth apart, and it was so sharp that it could cut through any force. The blood glow around Duan Lingkong's body surged, and a 300-foot-long blood river appeared, blocking in front of Chu Xiu. Although the Blood River cult's cultivation method was not as powerful as the Blood Demon divine technique, for a powerhouse like Duan Lingkong who had cultivated to the heaven and earth mystic illumination stage, he had already absorbed a lot of qi and blood into his body. At this moment, the power of the Blood River was extraordinary. However, in the next moment, Chu Xiu's sharp saber that combined the saber intent of the shattering formula and the ethereal slash completely tore Duan Lingkong's Blood River apart. As if it had not encountered any obstruction at all, the saber aura slashed directly at him. In shock, the boundless qi and blood in Duan Lingkong's hand condensed into a blood-refined saber. The qi and blood on it was so dense that it was black, and it even faintly revealed a trace of powerful devil qi. This blood-refined saber collided with Chu Xiu's saber. With a loud bang, blood splattered in all directions. Duan Lingkong could not withstand the powerful force and was blasted away. He could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. A hint of horror appeared in his eyes. What kind of monster is this? The foundation of his strength is simply terrifying. However, in the next moment, he made a seal with his hand despite his injuries. The blood that had shattered into a pile of blood mist under Chu Xiu's saber suddenly condensed into threads and condensed under Chu Xiu's feet. It enveloped his entire body like a huge blood cocoon. At the same time, Duan Lingkong sneered and began to exert force, wanting to suck all the blood in Chu Xiu's body dry. However, his smile froze on his face because he sensed that there was no movement of qi and blood in the blood cocoon at all. The blood cocoon dispersed, but there was no one in it. Illusion. Duan Lingkong was horrified. In the next moment, 8 figures of Chu Xiu actually appeared around him. At the same time, they held devil qi longbows in their hands, and 8 triple annihilation arrows that were burning with pitch-black annihilation fire burst out explosively. The bloody light in Duan Lingkong's eyes skyrocketed, and the energy of his primordial spirit was raised to the limit. However, he could not see which one was real and which one was fake. He had never seen such an evil and terrifying illusion in his life. Suddenly, Duan Lingkong clenched his teeth and opened up a blood-red territory. He wanted to use the territory to forcefully resist the triple annihilation arrows and test the authenticity of the arrows. However, when all 8 arrows entered his territory, Duan Lingkong's expression changed abruptly. It's real. All 8 arrows are real. 8 extremely powerful arrows that were burning with annihilation fire are all real. Duan Lingkong did not dare to believe it. How could his opponent's strength be so powerful? At this critical moment, he could only set up the blood river around him and retract his territory to forcefully defend himself. The 8 arrows had already locked on all the places around him that he could dodge to. It was impossible for him to escape. With a loud bang, Duan Lingkong spat out a mouthful of blood again. The pitch-black annihilation fire wrapped around him and evaporated his 300 feet long blood river. However, before he could think of a way to eliminate the troublesome annihilation fire, Chu Xiu slashed the ground with his saber. In an instant, the ground trembled, and a huge wave of saber light rose from the ground, directly enveloping Duan Lingkong. 7 limits, annihilation. The blood river was extinguished, and fresh blood splattered everywhere. At this moment, Duan Lingkong's body was covered in blood, and his eyes were filled with horror. He was beaten up in all aspects. In front of this person, he did not even have the slightest chance to fight back. He was directly hung up and beaten up to this state. At this moment, Duan Lingkong no longer had the slightest intention to fight. The blood qi around his body exploded, and he wanted to escape to the mountain. However, at this moment, a whisper that sounded like a ghost whispering entered his ears. The sky was crying, and the blood rain was falling, but he could not absorb any energy from the blood rain. He could only feel an endless chill enveloping him. The void was torn apart, and a gigantic devil's hand fell directly on him, grabbing him in its hand. Scram! Duan Lingkong roared, and the blood qi around his body burned intensely. Only then did he finally break free from the gigantic hand that was formed by the mantra of great compassion. However, in the next moment, a figure had already appeared in front of him. A saber slashed down, and the saber's intent was sharp, tearing everything apart. The blood qi around his body was slashed apart. At this critical moment, he directly grabbed the saber with both his hands, and his blood qi burned madly. However, both of his arms were still torn apart, and his body was slashed to the ground, creating a huge pit. Duan Lingkong struggled to climb out of the pit, but in the next moment, Chu Xiu's hand was already on his neck, and his entire body was lifted up. Duan Lingkong was shocked to find that the blood qi that he could control at will in the past did not listen to his orders at all. Instead, under Chu Xiu's control, it was constantly boiling and concentrated in his head. Duan Lingkong's face was flushed, and he shouted in horror, "Spare me!" Before he could finish speaking, his head had already been squeezed by the expanding blood qi, like an exploding watermelon. The scene was very bloody, and it caused the warriors from the Blood River cult to completely break down. In reality, they had already broken down before this. The people under Chu Xiu had already rushed over when Chu Xiu and Duan Lingkong were fighting. They were all veterans who had followed Chu Xiu to fight all over the place, so they naturally did not need to command anything. Shang Tianliang's domain was unleashed, and it was basically a massacre. Everyone's power was not under their control, and it began to burn crazily until it exploded. Mei Qinglian's Red Lotus Hellfire was unleashed. Most of the warriors could not even get close to her, and they were directly burned to death by the hellfire of the Heart Demon. As for Lu Fengxian, when she smashed her halberd, there was almost no one who could withstand a single blow. By the time Chu Xiu killed Duan Lingkong, they had more or less cleared out everyone else. Shang Tianliang looked thoughtfully at Chu Xiu. He could feel that Chu Xiu's power had become stronger again. He had only been in seclusion for a few months. To a mysterious heaven and earth realm expert, who often used years as the unit of measurement for seclusion, this was nothing. Therefore, what Chu Xiu had become stronger was not the foundation of his power, but the control he had over it. The description of the martial immortal realm that Tian Hun had told Chu Xiu was very useful. At least, it allowed Chu Xiu to know where his path was and where he should put his efforts. Previously, Chu Xiu could not use 8 arrows at the same time with the Triple City Annihilation Arrow. Now, this was not his limit. Stepping on the mountain that was covered in blood, Chu Xiu continued towards the peak. During this time, not a single disciple of the Blood River Church dared to come down. When Chu Xiu arrived at the peak and saw the hall of the Blood River Church, there was a loud noise. The hall of the Blood River Church collapsed. Ancestor Blood River's blood-red robe fluttered in the wind, and a fierce aura emanated from his body. He walked in front of everyone and shouted, "Chu Xiu! You are courting death." Actually, from the moment Chu Xiu stepped into the mountain and killed the 2 disciples guarding the mountain, Ancestor Blood River had already sensed Chu Xiu's arrival. However, he could not do anything. This was because he was in seclusion. When he was chasing after Lu Jianghe, although Ancestor Blood River did not obtain the Blood Demon Divine Technique, he also sensed the wonders of the Blood Demon Divine Technique. For someone at Ancestor Blood River's level to cultivate to this level without the inheritance of a major sect, his talent was definitely not weak. Therefore, he had already gained some benefits from the things he comprehended during the fight. Therefore, after he returned, he immediately began to cultivate in seclusion and integrated it into his martial Tao. Earlier when Chu Xiu ascended the mountain, he was at a critical moment, and even if he wanted to make a move, he couldn't leave and could only watch helplessly as Chu Xiu killed Duan Lingkong. At this moment, he wished for nothing more than to swallow Chu Xiu alive. You're tuning in to the Unparalleled SwordWill YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.